Afternoon, everybody. I'm Katie from Team NSBRC, and I'm going to be facilitating on this afternoon's surgery. So welcome to the sixth and final session in our series of NSBRC online surgeries. I'm sure many of you are joining us from the morning session that we had on planning, which was very well attended, and I hope you found that helpful. So we're again joined by a number of industry experts this afternoon to discuss key topics on the subject of renovations, extensions and home improvements. I'm joined by my colleague, the Centre's technical expert and one of our main course presenters, David Hilton, who's going to be providing a brief introduction to this afternoon's talks. David and I will also be facilitating on our hosted question time later on today at 4:30, where we're going to invite our panel of experts back on camera to answer all of your questions. Now, before I hand over to David to introduce the talks, I would just like to briefly explain the functions on Zoom that you can use if you want to ask any questions. I'm sure most of you are quite familiar, as you've probably attended some sessions already, but just to give you a quick reminder, we do have a Q&A function, and that can be found at the bottom of the screen on the Zoom toolbar. So if you want to ask any of the presenters questions at any point, you can just use that. There is also a chat function on the right-hand side for any other comments or queries. But if you want to ask the presenter specifically a question, just ensure that you are using that Q&A function, as it does give you a better chance of having your questions answered. Another quick reminder that these sessions are being recorded and we're going to get these sent out to you mid next week. So with that being said, I shall hand over to David to introduce renovations, extensions and home improvements. So thank you very much, and over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Katie. I'm just going to share the screen now. Get these things out of the way. And looking at renovations and extensions and home improvements, we've actually seen a change quite a lot in how we approach these things, especially over the last year. In the past, a lot of the low-hanging fruit, as it were, for different projects might have been a new kitchen or a new bathroom, maybe a kitchen extension. But now we're starting to see home offices and sometimes two breakout areas for different members of the family to be able to work from home, whether it be with schooling or with work related activities. Obviously, with that, we have in the background yapping dogs and all sorts that could go on. Might even happen today, we never know. So let's hold thumbs that we don't have any of those interruptions. But today's agenda is quite full. I'm looking forward to it quite a bit because there's quite a lot of mixed stuff in here as well. And one of the things I have noticed over the last year, should we say, with different projects is exactly what Tom's going to be talking about, and that's funding. We've seen some projects that don't get completed. We've seen some projects that just don't even get started simply because the anticipation of what it would cost and the preparation of what it would cost simply hasn't been met. So it's very important to actually make sure that you know exactly what these things are going to cost. And the only way to know what it's going to cost is to understand what it is that you're actually trying to do, and not just think, right, I'll just be throwing some bricks at a patch in the garden and hoping that an extension appears. We recently went through this whole extension thing. We'd lived in the house for a while. We got planning permission and then thought, right, now we're going to do this extension. And 9 years later, we suddenly did the extension. So it's not overnight success. It was 9 years to make an overnight decision. But would I have done things differently? Perhaps. There are certain details that we look at it even now, having done the research, that we might have done differently. So you can never research too much, but do make a point of stopping somewhere. Don't keep researching and then never do the project. So make sure that absolutely that you can that the renovation fits into the budget. and that the budget fits the local area. It's one thing to be able to raise finance, it's another thing to have the most expensive house in the road. We did a loft conversion as well. So looking at the Telebeam products is a great way of adding space. So we've got two rooms upstairs that are loft conversions, and it just adds so much more space. That area is already yours, so you can use that quite happily to add an extra office space or bedrooms or even a plant room if it's going to be non-habitable, so long as it's strong enough. Now, with all of these things, design is absolutely key. And sometimes you look at your project and you think you know what you want. And on yesterday's subjects, even with choosing paint colors and those sorts of things, it's what you don't know that you don't know that actually catches you out at the end, and you think, wow, if only I'd thought about that earlier on. And that's where investing in design and investing in people that have experience that are able to guide you through it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the architects have to say, because if you really want to add a bit of flair, then you have to go down that route of really getting someone who is experienced in really maximizing and optimizing the opportunities within your property. And garden rooms, as well as garden offices, seem to have become the popular addition as well. There's ways of manipulating planning permission with that as well, and hopefully that comes up in the talk at 4 o'clock. And we've done a garage conversion as part of the build, not quite a garden office, but sort of halfway in between. It does lead out into the garden itself. But when we look at these types of projects, sometimes getting ideas from these guys as well will also be something that will be able to really give you an idea of what it will cost, and whether the space actually fits your garden. What you don't want to end up with is something that really looks cramped and looks like an afterthought just because you wanted some extra space in the garden. Now, don't forget, we've got question time at 4:30, where we'll have all the presenters. And at that stage, we hope that you've sent in some good questions. Over the past couple of days, we've had some excellent questions, and it's really got some good conversation going. And sometimes just by putting in that question, you don't know that there might be a load of other people that also want to want to know the answer to those questions, but just haven't been brave enough to ask. And then we aim to end at around 5 o'clock. Now, when we start looking at renovations, if you're a little bit unsure and you want to know more about structural elements, and if you're worried about damp and things like that, then by all means look at the Guide to Renovation Projects. We run a one-day course at the Self-Build and Renovation Center. And we start looking at things like how to run the project. We look at damp, we look at planning permission, we look at structural defects. And then we also start looking at some of the heating elements and just have a bit of a guide of certain things to think about with regard to kitchens and bathrooms, just a little tiny snippet of that, because that becomes almost a subject on its own. But you've got to think with the end in mind. And when it comes to design, yes, you could use apps. There's quite a lot of quite handy apps around that help you visualize how things are going to be. But you've really got to work out what it is that you're going to have. And what we've done in our project, the two pictures at the bottom, one is the loft conversion before it was finished, and the one is the garage conversion that became a bit of a garden room. That was also before it was completely finished. There was a utility in that area as well. But trying to visualize what it was like, what it was going to be when it was finished was the difficult bit. That kind of visualization, we just couldn't quite get the imagery right. When I was trying to explain it to my wife, I was saying, I think that it's going to look like X or Y, and then we'd have conversations, and we'd end up not with actually any description of what it's going to look like. So getting drawings is crucial. And then when you get quotes, it's absolutely crucial to have drawings for quotes as well. And how you approach the project could also make a huge difference on the budget. If you come on the project management course, the guys will look at the project management triangle, where you look at time, cost, and quality. And what we did was we didn't want to compromise on the quality, but we stretched the time. And if we'd done a quick job with a one builder, then the extension that we actually did probably would have come in at around 80 to 90,000 pounds, somewhere between that, because we added renewables. As it's happened, what we've done though is we've probably taken a year to do the project rather than 8 weeks, and it's come in at about between 50 and 60. So by managing the trades yourself, taking a bit more time, you can actually bring costs down quite considerably without compromising on the quality. Now, on the left-hand side is the renovation house at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre. And you will be able to go through that and see, obviously, the first fix, like you can see with the as built, and then right through, it takes you through the different stages to the finished zone as well, where you've got additions like solar tubes and finished bathrooms. It's been renovated again since that time of that photo, but it just gives you an idea of what can potentially be done with the whole project. And with things like bathrooms and kitchens, it's very, very important to know where your services are, because if you want to start moving things around, like you want to move your kitchen sink somewhere else, you've got to make sure that your drains can drop. They have to drop at 18 millimeters per horizontal meter. And if they can't drop, because like in our case, half the pipes were already buried in the screed, so we couldn't actually drop them any further to take them to where we wanted them to be, the whole design becomes limited by sometimes where your services are. So just be a little bit careful of that. Try and put insulation in wherever you can. Try and get in draft proofing. Start with the fabric first. You shouldn't be limited on a renovation as to whether you can put extra ventilation in. We've included mechanical ventilation and heat recovery in there. And just to give you an example of what's actually gone into this 1980s bungalow, we've put in 2 heat pumps. Because the garden's quite small, the air source heat pump in the garden does not run during summer. Clearly at the moment it runs, but the windows are closed, so we don't hear it. The micro heat pump is built into the hot water cylinder. And as such, that is what makes the hot water. And we've got photovoltaic panels on the roof that will then, during summer, deliver pretty much free electricity to the hot water cylinder. And therefore the hot water is fairly cost neutral. We put in mechanical ventilation and actually coupled it up with this micro heat pump. So as we recover the heat from the house, a heat recovery ventilation unit, I know the guys will say on the box that the unit gives you 95% efficiency or somewhere around there. But then I get told that my pickup truck will give me 48 miles to the gallon. Not even down a highly greased mine shaft with a tailwind will I get 48 miles to the gallon. But somehow with cars, we tend to accept that. We won't get the efficiencies that are advertised, but somehow with energy technologies, we want the full performance. Now, I would say with mechanical ventilation, you're pretty much going to recover 3/4 of the energy. So if you've got air going out of your house at 20 degrees, I would expect it to be coming in at 15 if it was 0 outside. So it's bringing fresh air in, passing it through a heat exchanger and recovering that energy. Now, what is the return on investment on that? That was one of the questions that came up yesterday. And the return on investment on mechanical ventilation is difficult to actually put into perspective, because it depends what you're comparing it to. Most people don't ventilate their properties enough. So if you're comparing it to before, you've now added the fact that you're going to be using fans to ventilate your house, which may use sort of 1 to 2 kilowatts of energy per day, which is going to be somewhere between sort of 16 to 30 pence per day to run, depending on the size of your house. Now, if you didn't ventilate your house before, then this would be an additional cost. If you ventilated your house by opening your windows, then and you had trickle vents that actually work, then you should be ventilating your house at half an air change an hour, somewhere around there, which means that you're going to lose 20 degrees every 2 hours. This way, you're only losing 5 degrees every 2 hours. So your 16 pence that you are spending is far cheaper than the amount of energy you'd lose and the cost that you'd lose by just letting the heat go out through the trickle vents. So it depends on how much you ventilate and how you would have ventilated before to be able to really work out what the return on investment is. For us, the return on investment is that over the past 2 winters, we've only had condensation on one window, and that window is one that's actually got a blown pane in it, which we need to replace. It was on the older part of the property that did not get new windows. So that one pane needs to be replaced because it's misting up. And then it won't have any more condensation on it, which is quite important. Now, adding a heat pump instead of oil, we didn't have gas. If we'd had gas, I would have kept the gas boiler. Adding a heat pump in, we put underfloor heating only in the new bit. We've got low temperature radiators in the rest of the house, and we've added in motorized valves onto the radiators. Because thermostatic radiator valves are really inaccurate. They have numbers sort of 1 to 5, and all those really do is indicate which way you've got to turn it. So you turn it up a bit, you run downstairs, you come back half an hour later, you think it's not hot enough, you turn it up some more, you go downstairs, you come back half an hour later, you then turn it down because it's too hot. Whereas with motorized valves, and you can get wireless ones as well if the house has been redecorated, the Honeywell Evo Home or Heat Genius or the Drayton Weiser systems, and a lot of the other brands also have motorized systems that are wireless. You can then set up on your phone or on even from your smart device, the one with the names, the Googles and the Amazon ones as well. I'm not going to say the Amazon one because there's one in this room and things will start turning on and off if I say her name. So with regard to that, you can then control your heating and you can say, I want the bedroom number 1 to have a temperature of 21 degrees. It will then turn the heating, the valve open until you get to 21 degrees and then turn it off at that point. It's not the Hive system that turns your boiler on and off. It's controlling each room. And that makes a huge difference. Zone control, mammothly huge difference on it. When we put the stuff in, because we were joining things together, we actually found that ductwork went all over the place. We had a carbon filter to stop the fumes from outside coming in. You have to have a concrete plinth for the air source heat pump outside. So you do need to plan these things in and make sure that you've got the right wiring going to the places you need them. The carbon filters is brilliant. It just freshens up all the air coming in. But you need space for all of these things. And the ductwork looks a bit hideous when one looks at it like that. But then when you tidy it all up, it does sort of disappear. And the room at the back is the old garage room. It does make a bit of a difference just to have the ventilation, to have a utility area. And one can see with this that yes, the ducting takes up quite a lot of space, but you can put the ventilation fans out of the way. You could put them in the loft and really make it as discreet as possible, so long as you can get to the unit for changing the filters, because the filters will need to be changed periodically. It's getting the ducts in, because if we look at the picture on the right hand side, where the filter is, there's a duct running in the joist underneath it, and those ducts are between 125 and 150 millimeters round. So you have to be able to put them between the joists and somehow make sure that you can get the terminals where you want them, and you don't then end up with having to make holes through joists. Now, if you've got a new build, you've got the benefit of being able to change joists to open web joists, which makes a large difference. But if you've got an existing property, then you don't always have that benefit. And we used 3 or 4 different types of ducts to be able to move around in the property just to get it right. And because the house wasn't airtight, we've actually put 2 terminals in each room, one bringing air in, one bringing it out. So we've balanced each room to not have air leakage, rather than balancing the whole house. That way we do not have to have undercuts under the doors, and the whole house will ventilate and just be fresh. And one of the other things to think about with all of this is make sure you get drawings, make sure you let the electricians know, make sure you tell everybody where everything's going to go. And we had a talk 2 days ago on putting smart stuff into your property. And one of the questions was, what would you put in? And in what we did as a basic is just put Ethernet wires in, and coaxial cable, which is aerial cable for the TVs, just so that you can actually get your computer, you can get your TVs, all of the things that don't move, you can get them wired into your hub for internet connection. We're spending so much more time at home, and we're really draining the capacity of Wi-Fi. So why not only use the Wi-Fi for things that perhaps are out of reach? So if you're rewiring the house, make sure you can get that Ethernet cable in. It doesn't have to be fully smart, but just by having those sorts of things connected, we've got the TV connected direct, and we've got some of the computers and the Xbox or PlayStation, whichever one it was that they've got now. I think they've got an Xbox but want a PlayStation. Apparently PlayStation knows no limits but can't be bought. But that's another story. The Ethernet just means you don't get those spinning wheels unless your facility coming into your property is the problem. But at least you don't get the spinning wheels because of the Wi-Fi on there. The other thing to look at is how smart do you want the property to be? Where's the telly going to go? Make sure you brief the electrician. I mentioned it a couple of days ago as well, that we had tellies wanting them mounted on the wall, and they put the Ethernet cables on where the telly is, and they put the coax cables, and only on one of them did they actually put a power plug. So we could connect to the phone, we could connect to the TV, connect to everything else, but we just couldn't plug it in. And also the service conduit that he'd put in wasn't big enough for what's known as an HDMI plug to be able to get down. So we couldn't put the plugs in to plug the Sky or Virgin box into the telly as well, which made a little bit of a challenge. And that kind of brings me to the end of just a summary of what to think about, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of the day, and see you at 4:30 for question time. If there were any questions that have come up so far, then I'd be happy to take them if Katie's got any.
Hi, Dave. Yes, we have had a few questions come in already. So I shall pick one to ask you now. Okay, so this one's from Greg, and he's written in, we're doing a loft conversion and are considering underfloor heating, but wonder why many homes don't use underfloor heating upstairs, but use radiators instead. Is there an issue with heating or cooling the ground floor ceiling? For example, does it affect the downstairs ceiling life or cause plaster to drop?
It's a good question. A lot of the time, it's the routing of the water pipes that is the problem, because the guys don't like weaving them in and out of existing joists, and they don't like notching them as well. If you put it as an overlay, you then have to be able to make sure that you can get heat into that room, and that you're not messing up the staircase. Because if you suddenly add 20 mil to the top floor with a polystyrene board that has a rebate in it, then you will suddenly find that the last step of your staircase is now 20 millimeters higher than it was. So getting the pipes in and routing the water to those areas is the challenge. And also a lot of guys like to have carpets in their room. So the rule of thumb with underfloor heating is that the harder the surface is, the more it will transmit. So if you've already put your pipes underneath your chipboard or underneath your floorboards, and then you put carpet on top, even if you've got a tog value as low as 2.5 and you've got chipboard as well, it'll take a long time for the heat to actually get into the room. And in the time it takes to circulate in the pipes in that room, it's already, the heat's already left. It hasn't been able to get into the room. So you might find that your heating system goes into short stop-start cycles. So planning your underfloor heating upstairs is crucial. It's absolutely possible, but you've got to plan it early and make sure you can get the pipe work to it and that it will deliver the heat that you want.
Great, thank you, Dave. Another question that's just come through from Katie. She's asked, what do you think of microwave panel heaters?
Microwave panel heaters. I'm not quite sure what those are, but I think you're meaning infrared. And there's a lot of different products out there for infrared heating panels. We use two different ones. We've got one in a bathroom that we've got on a ceiling, so that when you get out the shower, you've got that bit of radiant heat, because with underfloor heating, you don't get radiant heat. You just want that something to just make it feel a bit better. And we've also got one in a built-in barbecue area outside, so that when it gets a bit chilly, even in summer, you can just put it on rather than burning a load more wood. Or if you just want to stay out for just one more, you could just put the heating on and still enjoy the garden. It maximizes the use of space. So infrared heating we use for that, for task heating. There are a whole lot of different frequencies on it. It's not something we can go through in just one answer. We do tackle it a bit on the heating course. So if you wanted to come along and attend the heating course, then we do tackle the different ways that the infrared systems work on that. But otherwise, shop around and make sure you know what you're getting on them, because there's a big difference between a panel that goes in your bathroom just to heat you up at a relatively short distance to the type of radiant heaters that you'd have outside for perhaps smoking sheds in pubs, if you remember what pubs are. Katie.
Thanks, Dave. So I think we've got time for just one more question, and then we'll hand over to Tom McSherry from Built Store. So this question is from Emma, and she's written in, can solar tubes / light pipes be used in passive house designs? i.e., what's the impact on air tightness and thermal bridging? Best avoided?
Good question. There are passive house accredited solar tubes and sun pipes. So not all of them are, because for that very reason that they do potentially add a thermal bridge to the property. But there are passive house accredited versions of them. So just the same as there's passive house accredited versions of cat flaps and all of those sorts of things and letterboxes, there's also passive house accredited solar tubes and sun pipes. What they cost, I have no idea, but I do know that they're available because I've seen them. Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Dave. It's very helpful. So we are a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, but that is no bad thing, as we've got quite a lot of content to get through. So with that in mind, I'm going to invite Tom McSherry from Build Store to come on. We've got his Funding a Home Improvement Project talk coming up next. So I'm just going to stay on screen until we've got this sorted. So I can see Tom's come onto the screen, but I can't see your image there, Tom.
No, neither can I, Katie.
Okay.
Not quite sure why. Having a quick look. Should be working because I've got the video running and unmuted, and I'm also.
So the main thing is that we can hear you, and you can still screen share, I should imagine. So we won't worry too much. And we've actually just had a comment come through saying what you can do is you could try hitting F8 on your keyboard, because that might work. It might turn on your camera. Perhaps or Control V. That's sometimes like. There we go. Thank you very much, Emma.
Thank you for that. That was a great.
That worked. There we go. Fantastic. Well, now we can see you, and I can also see your slides, which is excellent. So I will leave you to crack on with your talk. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Katie, and thank you, David. Informative as always. First of all, it's a shame that we all can't be together at the National Self-Build Centre. It's an incredible facility. And I have noticed that I've got type texting going on at the bottom of my screen. There's a nasty rumour it's because of my dreadful accent, so that everyone's clear and can understand. But I believe it's just a very helpful facility. As you can see, my name's Tom McSherry, and I'm the National Relationship Manager for BuildStore, who have been funding self-builds, renovations, conversions for in excess of 21 years. And I believe we're now in excess of 25,000 self-built properties built. There's a small BuildStore village somewhere. But it's interesting because this phrase self-build and self-build mortgages are continually brought up as part of construction funding. And I think in many ways it's a shame because, yes, self-build is one element now, and we're currently funding somewhere between 14 and 15,000 builds per annum. However, there are far more renovations, extensions, conversions, home improvements being done every year than there are self-builds. But it's the same lenders, it's a similar product range, with a very distinctive change to how the cash flow works. And I think it's really important, therefore, for anyone who's considering requires funding for a project in any shape or form that's related to construction, then what we have is stage payment mortgages. And I want to take the opportunity today as part of the event to look at how these work and when they will be valid and what options are best for you. So what type of projects are part of what we'll look at, and what challenges you face. And Dave's already spoke about some of these challenges. You know, and there's some TV programs that do a wonderful job of showing us how to get it pretty badly wrong. But of course they are for TV. There are well-trodden paths to ensure that that doesn't turn out to be your project. And a major part of that, as Dave has highlighted, is the finance and the budgeting element. So we'll focus on it. We'll look at some of the keys to a successful project. And depending on what your home improvements are, what does that structure look like? That includes renovations, conversions, Dave doing an extension to his current home, or rightly, as he's indicated, people building garden spaces now, because we're spending more time from home and working from home. So it's becoming very much an increased part of how we either improve our home or give us a better quality in terms of working from home. And we'll look at some distinctive case studies. And importantly, what's the difference between how the high street would fund a home improvement project, the benefits and limitations to what they have to offer, and how BuildStore and their unique lending panel and partners that we have, and what they do differently that perhaps could unlock you to expand your project beyond what you currently think you can fund, predominantly because we look beyond the current value of the house. And that might be indeed buying something that's run down already. So I think plenty to go at today. And just as a quick feel, some projects to give you a flavour for the sort of thing that we're funding on a daily basis. The top left-hand corner, courtesy of Beco Wallform, an ICF system that of course is in the centre, a traditional old bungalow that's had a beautiful modern extension added to it. A conversion project, and many of these are converting either what was perhaps office space into residential, barns being converted, and of course with the planning amendments to create what we have Q planning, where you can take an agricultural dwelling and change it to a residential home for the first time within permitted development rights. We're seeing far more barn conversions than previously, which is exciting because the stunning properties, as you can see with the image from Bramwell Glencairn in this case. Remodeling and refurbishing, Dave spoke about his own. At the space I'm in today, we've remodeled last year and knocked walls down, created a new open plan kitchen dining area, which has been great to work from, and simply looking at general home improvements. All of them that require funding may need a different solution, but one thing that we'll always come back to is cash flow, which will be the most important thing. In terms of the challenges that you could face, well, If you're buying a property that's in need of renovation, first of all, is it habitable to begin with? And if it's not habitable, the standard high street residential lenders and valuers may deem that the property is not fit for mortgage purposes. Is it structurally sound? Important when buying a property, of course, we have the valuation process. Some people will have a structural engineer's report as part of it to give us a more detailed analysis. But is the property structurally sound? There's a requirement for underpinning that, again, may look like a fairly traditional home, but if there's ongoing settlement because of structural issues, it may be deemed unsuitable for residential mortgage purposes. It's really important to understand when the funds will be released. Whether it's a self-build, a renovation, a conversion, an extension, you will have suppliers, professionals that you have working in your home, and it's essential that you understand when the funds are being released because they're entitled to be paid as part of your contractual agreement. How much deposit you'll need, again, equally important, and we'll look at examples where you already own your home or when you're buying it. What's the difference in the deposit required? And important, particularly I would suggest when we're looking at renovations and conversions at that heavier end, I think we need a bigger contingency than you would even that typical 10% that people talk about when you're building a new home. So often until you strip a property, we don't quite see. Dave showed you a good example of the renovation house at the National Self-Build Centre. Until you strip something back to its raw state, it's often at that point we discover the severity of the remedial work that's required. So a bigger contingency is often something that's very important to consider. So the key to a successful project, well, yeah, you're going to have your professionals, your architects, designers, all particularly important. But from a financial point of view, it's really important that you organise your finances at the outset so that you understand your cash flow. What is cash flow? It's understanding that the right money is there at the right time in the right place. There are ways to control it, and there are very defined ways to mitigate risk as a result of it. And I would implore anyone about to embark on these projects that that first step is to engage with your finance expert to establish your budget clearly before sitting down with the architect. Please do the justice to the architect in terms of providing them a very clear budget, not one that you think you can fund, not one that you can run away with in terms of design, but if you have a very clear budget, you design the project to the budget. Don't design the project and try and squeeze it into a budget that you then find out might be challenging to actually deliver through to completion. It's about completing the build, as Dave's already highlighted. How do we finance home improvements? They differ depending on whether you're actually buying the house or if it's your current main residence that you're improving. And that could include remortgaging the current house. It might actually include your current lender if you have lots of equity, providing you with further funds from the existing lender, which is particularly relevant if you're in a product that perhaps has an early repayment charge that could be fairly hefty. So a further advance from the current lender is also worth considering, or indeed remortgaging. It could be that if we're looking for something that's at the heavier end of renovation, and if you're buying it and it's not habitable, we may then be looking at more construction type stage payment mortgages. And we'll consider how those operate both in advance or in arrears. Buying properties, and we sometimes have developers using the auction process relatively regular, where they're buying a property to do it up relatively quickly, turn it over into either a commercial let property or to sell for profit. Then the bridging facility also can be considered and can be considered for your own main residence. And we'll look at some examples. Let's start with the remortgage option. When is it relevant? Well, obviously it's relevant when you already own the property. And it's a very common way of raising finance for home improvements. Effectively, what you're doing is releasing the equity from what's currently in bricks and mortar into liquid cash that allows you to fund your home improvements, whether it be a loft conversion, extensions, or general renovations. That might be, of course, moving you to a new lender. That new lender taking on board the current value of the project. And we'll come on to the self-build element, and I use that phrase just as a general phrase, construction stage payment mortgages, where we could look beyond the current value of the property, because if we want to fund extensions and we've got a limitation by way of its current value, that's an excellent way for us to have a greater level of work carried out. Remortgaging, particularly remortgaging from your current main residence to improve that property, might have some significant limitations. And that limitation is primarily down to the current value of the house is the limit to which you can borrow against. And we're all aware of your mortgage product might be a 60% loan to value, 70, 80, 85% loan to value. That loan to value is based on the current value of the property. If that isn't sufficient and you cannot release sufficient, then you're limiting the project. There are ways for us to look beyond that, but it's something as part of how we would holistically review how your project can be funded. Then a remortgage is one option, but we are conscious that we're limited by the fact that the current value is all we can release up to. Of course, we also need to consider you may have early repayment charges, and that could affect the timing of the work that you're looking to do. Understand your repayment charges and when they tail off, because you may be only a few months of falling into the period where you are out of an early repayment charge. That might be the time to plan the project. And of course, they're ideal for small home improvements, new kitchens, new bathrooms, where we tend not to be stretching and needing to push beyond the limits of the current value of the property. Stage payment mortgages is also an option for us to consider. And definitely more for the projects that require perhaps further funding than just a small kitchen and general home improvements. I see someone putting a question in about loft conversions. Ideal for going up into a loft space. Actually, removing the roof and taking a single story, going up into 2 stories, or an extension wraparound. When we're doing considerably more work, it sounds like something Dave had done, then ideally, then what we're looking is we can have a stage payment mortgage where the money comes out in bite-sized chunks as the project goes along, either in advance or arrears, and we'll speak about that shortly. But we can have those stage payments guaranteed based on your build costs. Some products rely on an uplift on the value after a stage is completed. That's something as advisors and having an expertise in this area, Build Store, are very focused around understanding whether you can progress to the next stage if the value doesn't go up. We see many grand designs programs where the client's not getting any further money from the lender. It may be that there's further money to be released, but it's simply that the value hasn't increased in line with the spend and the lender cannot release any further funds. Build Store's done a huge amount of work over the last few years with their lending partners, bringing forward cost-based lending, which I'll explain in a wee bit more detail, that removes the risk of the property not increasing in value and therefore ensuring that the funds continue to come to progress the build. Many traditional mortgage products and lenders will not lend on a property where major works have been carried out. Our unique cost-based products and guaranteed stage payments are ideal for this solution. Something that is equally important to consider. When you start to move from general home improvements into structural work, you of course need to consider your planning and building control requirements. But you need to think carefully around your current buildings and contents insurance. There is a real likelihood that you will invalidate your buildings and contents by changing this into a construction project. There are design products, site insurance and structural warranty that's there to replace your basic buildings and contents cover. So don't fall foul of that and start a project without the correct insurance in place. The bridging loans are fast, flexible, don't have as high a loan to value, and they fall into 2 distinctive camps. They're either non-regulated bridging, which is where you're funding a project to let or sell. It's not for your primary main residence. That funding can be available for any time up to 24 months, limited often 60 to 70% of the project. And it's really important, as it highlights here, that you know your exit strategy, because it needs to be repaid at a given point that's pre-agreed, and that'll either be by refinancing it as a buy-to-let or selling the property. You need to ensure the funding's in place long enough to complete the work and give you an appropriate time frame to either flip it onto a buy-to-let, if that was the exit strategy, or indeed sell the property. The regulated side is where you're either taking a charge over your current main residence to fund your next main residence, or indeed you're funding against your next main residence as a bridging facility. That makes it a regulated bridge and changes the rules and timeframes. The predominant change is that the funding is only available for a maximum period of 12 months. Therefore, if the build period is 12 months, might indeed be very unsuitable because you don't have the time to control the exit strategy. That's important for us to understand how long the work will take. Particularly helpful at the bridging facility when, like myself, marching towards an age where perhaps borrowing becomes a bit more restricted, and beyond retirement, many people still wanted to do works. And in fact, bridging is ideal for where there's an unencumbered home, where you can take a charge over that one to fund something in the garden space that's on a separate title. Ideal, but again, the timing is important because it's not based on income, it's an asset-based loan, and ideal in many instances, especially auction, where there's a quick purchase timescale required and it's a quick turnaround. If not, then we need to look at something more significant. In terms of financing a renovation or conversion project, we've given examples of traditional mortgages, a remortgage, stage payment mortgages. There isn't a one-size-fits-all. Each project's unique, each cash flow will be unique, and it's really important that when you're speaking to someone and taking advice, you're dealing with someone that's a specialist in this particular field. The way you fund your project will depend on your own personal financial circumstances and indeed the level of work that's required. Is it a habitable property, as we highlighted earlier? Whether you own the property or not, if it has a mortgage on it, or is it unencumbered? So these are all important factors to establish which channel and route will take the funding down. The traditional mortgage, again, ideal, as I've highlighted, for small home improvements, kitchens and bathrooms, limited to the current value of the property. Some lenders will hold a retention. So if you're buying it, they'll say, you know, the kitchen needs upgrading, so we're going to hold 5,000 or 10,000 back and not release that until such times as the work has been carried out. And you definitely need savings for your purchase or your deposit. Again, please be aware of the buildings and contents insurance. If it's not deemed as habitable and you won't be living in the property, the insurance might be better towards site insurance type policy, which is for construction purposes. Stage payment mortgages for that heavier end project, or where we're not want to be limited to the current value, because the unique key difference is if I'm building an extension to my house that might be worth 200,000, I'm limited to that 200,000. If by conducting the work, we've gone up a floor, extending the loft, doing a wraparound extension, the property becomes worth 300,000, the stage payment mortgage process allows you to borrow up to the end value of the project when it's completed, beyond its current value. Now, what that's doing is releasing future equity effectively and building and creating a bigger opportunity for you. So really important to understand that we can move beyond the current value and we're focusing on the end value of the work when completed. The key difference, of course, is rather than a remortgage where you get all the money at once, or a purchase where you get it all at once, the money comes in bite-sized chunks, in stages. We'll tailor those stages with you, and you will only pay for the mortgage on the amount that's released at each stage. If that is to secure the property initially, an old barn, you'll pay the amount that you've taken to purchase the barn. We'll then have stage payments that will increment the barn through to completion, and your monthly mortgage payments increase as you take funds progressing the build through to completion. Many of you, as I know, as a sector, our clients are very learned in research, products, etc. And you'll be aware that the interest rates are marginally higher than the high street interest rates, typically between 3.8 and the high 5%. All of our lender partners at BuildStore have given us a concession that those mortgages will be on an interest-only basis during the purchase process and during the construction phase of the build. And importantly, that interest-only concession runs through to the end of the build, and either at the point of completion, the lender will invite you to choose one of the normal residential products, so you're not tied onto the self-build rate beyond the period of the construction work, or some of the products are priced that they don't have an early repayment charge, which allows us to review your long-term mortgage goals from the high street. So really important, typically allowed to borrow up to 85% of the purchase price or 85% of the build costs. In addition, one of our lenders allowing us to borrow 95% of the purchase and the build costs. If you already own the property and there's significant equity there, then there's a real prospect of having the ability to borrow 100% of the project funding. And that includes removing the current lender perhaps, and giving you additional funds to progress the build through to completion. Now, importantly, cash flow is something that I've mentioned on a number of occasions. And I look beyond interest rates initially, because the most important thing is cash flow. Once we have lenders that deliver the cash flow, we focus on interest rates. We never start with interest rates. One of the most important things to consider when you're doing a renovation of a property, and even extensions, loft conversions, removing the roof and changing it, after stage one of the project, it is common for it to be worth less than it was when you bought it, or worth less than it was when the mortgage was originally put in place. If you take the roof off, there will be a significant low point valuation. If your mortgage product that you have requires an increase in value before you receive any further funds, then be aware that that could be significantly problematic. Therefore, BuildStore for many years have been working hard to design products that remove risk. And I think one of the greatest strengths of the organisation is that product innovation. Excuse me. Therefore, where we have a concern that the value may go down and there is a requirement for funds beyond that value, we simply move to a product which is cost-based. And cost-based lending can either be after each stage is completed or indeed before the stage begins. Before the stage begins, of course, it's particularly helpful if you have a small deposit and it ensures guarantees cash flow. Getting the funds before the stage starts is what it does as a product. What it does for you as a self-build renovator, converter of a property, is puts the money in the bank account before the stage of the work's about to be carried out. Because don't be fooled into milestones being how projects work. In my experience, both renovating properties and building one home, every day is a pay-away day. Whether it be paying your contractors monthly or weekly, whether it be a requirement to go to the builder's merchant on a daily or weekly basis. And if the money's in the bank account at the start, you can pay for things via cash. You can pay your contractor on a more regular basis. I can assure you that will be a better relationship between you and your contractor. And without running builders merchants, there's an opportunity to negotiate better discounts. So please be aware that we can mitigate risk and any concerns about the value of the property not increasing by BuildStore's unique cost-based mortgage products, available for extending your home, renovating and converting properties. What are the stages? Well, either you own the property, if not, we're purchasing the property as stage one. And the initial stage would be that preliminary cost of the structural overhaul. And that could be tearing it back down to its rawest position, removing windows and doors and underpinning if there's structural defects. We're then taking the property back to wind and water type, new windows, doors, roof in, extension completed. Then it's internals looking at the First fix, the plastering and the services. Second fix and completion, including landscaping, the disabled ramps, etc. So some defined stages. Your project, whether you own it or not, and the type of project will dictate which of those stages we need. But we can tailor the cash flow in scenario specifically to your project. I want to look at a couple of examples to give you an understanding of the type of work that's required and how it impacts on our, as advisors, how we would find the right solution for you. This looks like a property that fairly standard property, although you can see from the windows it's in need of modernising. And in this case, this was a project that needed new bathrooms, kitchen, and a general modernisation throughout. The purchase price of the property was 120,000. £20,000 of work required, of which none was structural, and the end value was increasing. So certainly worth doing the project to 170,000. First of all, there was an opportunity to remortgage the current home because there was lots of equity, and releasing that equity provided the deposit to put in for the mortgage for the property, and actually can release sufficient to do the building work as well. We could have arranged an 85% mortgage simply to purchase it, and then the savings that we've released gives you the deposit and gives you the money for the work. So the current home in this instance was the catalyst and the driver to release the funds to enable the security of this property to renovate it and then move into the home. A very different proposition. You can see it doesn't even have windows and doors. A fairly bigger project in terms of the volume of work to be carried out. Certainly can't be bought through a residential mortgage because it's not habitable. And in fact, the require for a replacement of the roof turns this into a fairly major construction project. But again, purchase of 50,000 of works. And I think these are the type of projects we talk about building in a healthy contingency, but very much worthwhile doing because of the end value. So solution, it was purchased at the 150 and works of 50. So always important to work out the total project costs, 200,000. We created an advanced stage payment self-building mortgage, stage payment mortgage. That allowed the client to get 127,500 to put towards the purchase, and with 42,500 pounds towards the works, which was in 3 instalments. Taking the property, replacing the roof back to wind and watertight, first fix and plaster, second fix and completion. And as you can see, the client had also an extra 10,000 in savings. That was important from a contingency perspective. So this very much towards the heavier end of work took us into stage payment mortgages rather than using residential high street. And I thought it was worthwhile just looking at the impact, the comparison of the two, where it can work. If you're looking at your current home that has a mortgage, you want to build an extension or do home improvements. The scenario here was a specific project that I had looked at where the property was worth 200,000, had a mortgage of 170. They wanted to do an extension to the property, which was going to build costs were £50,000. Engaged an architect, designed the property, but hadn't looked at the finance structure before. The problem we had is using the current residential route where you're limited to the current value of the house, even taking a 95% mortgage, which since this has become very thin on the ground, the client could only release £20,000, which had a £30,000 shortfall using the residential high street route. Using a stage payment mortgage, then we can borrow up to 80% of the end value of the project, which allows an additional £30,000 to be put towards the project and indeed progressing the build through to completion. So the advanced stage payment model again worked well because we could give the client the 95% to remove the current mortgage and then provide 95% of the build costs, looking at the end value rather than being limited by the current value of the home. To summarise, I've reiterated on a number of occasions that cash flow is the most important factor to ensure your project runs smoothly. It enables you to be a cash buyer. Cash flow is the understanding of when the funds arrive on site to pay your professional people and your tradespeople. It's important you understand the difference between valuation-based lending and cost-based lending, and the restrictions that the lender has. Will it be based on the current value, or can we look beyond that and look at the project when it's completed? Going direct to lenders, of course, restricts your options, because many of the lenders that work and panel exclusively with BuildStore sit within a very supportive sector, the building society sector, and many of them provide their funding exclusively through the BuildStore group, and we distribute that to the sector. We have a team of specialist advisors, some of them based in the centre. If we could have been there in person, of course, we had the opportunity to speak to them today, but there is an opportunity for me to take questions, and hopefully the Q&A we can, and of course my own details will come up shortly. Please feel free to email or contact us directly for any guidance that you require. And of course, that expertise not only lies with advisors in terms of the construction and mortgage knowledge, but also site insurance and structural warranty, because that may indeed be an integral part of what's needed to protect the property in terms of its during construction and beyond for the next 10 years to ensure that the property is mortgageable. Hopefully, from a timing point of view, I'm just a bit bang on time at 3 o'clock. Katie, I'm not sure if you're there, and I'm not sure if we have time for any questions, but I'm certainly staying for the rest of the day and will be part of the Q&A. Thank you, everyone.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Tom. I think just to keep to timings this afternoon, we will move on to the next presenter, but you have had some questions come through on funding, so we will come back to those for our question time later on, if that's all right with you, Tom.
Of course it is. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So if I could just ask you to, stop screen sharing, and then Digby, if I could get you to just pop your slides on the screen for us, please.
Hello, Katie. Can you see that screen okay, Katie?
So if you just go on to slideshow for us, Digby, and then you just need to hit play from beginning. So it's just at the top, if you just move your mouse up. And then, so yep, slideshow. You see on the top bar there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so just that, and then, start slideshow. Perfect, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Welcome, everybody. My name's Digby Rousell. I'm the director and inventor of the Telebeam system. I've been in construction nearly 50 years. 30 years of that as an architectural technician with my own practice, 5 years as a building control surveyor, and the rest with Telebeam. I'm going to do a presentation on a guide to loft conversions, and hope this will be of help to anybody considering a loft conversion. General tips, this is a big topic. Loft conversion is something which looks at first glance quite easy, but technically is quite challenging. So lots of things to consider. So hope this will be of help to everybody. So the first thing to consider, is my property suitable? As I said, it's a complicated project, so consider the age and construction of the building generally. If it's a very, very old building with no foundations and a poor roof construction, a loft conversion is going to be problematic. So identify what sort of roof construction you have. The photograph on the top shows an older style, what's called a cut roof. It's a cut roof because it's cut on site and was typical up to the sort of mid-1960s. The one below is a typical modern trussed roof found from sort of late 1960s onwards. So you need to look at what space you have inside the roof to start with, the roof pitch, the headroom you have, and bear in mind the loss of headroom that you'll get with the conversion, because the floor will raise up because of the strengthening of the floor, and the slope areas will also reduce because of the insulation build-up, which takes up quite a bit of space. And the structural consideration, what people don't appreciate, if they walk into the roof space, stand in the loft, it feels quite solid, straightforward, but in fact the design loads you have to cater for are 6 times as heavy as storage loading. So in a typical modest 3-bedroom house, you might be adding around 6 tons of design load just for the floor load. So you imagine parking 4 Ford Mondeos in the roof space. That's the sort of loads you have to support. And the staircase solution and the loss of space to get access for the stairs, that's another very, very important factor. Probably one of the single most important factors of the success of the conversion. And means of escape. In a bungalow loft conversion, it's more straightforward because you can have means of escape windows at loft level. In a house loft conversion, where you've got 2 stories and you're adding a loft, the presumption is creating a safe means of passage from the loft down through the building to a point of safety, which is usually the front door. Also, if it's a modern building, make sure it's not timber framed. These can be converted, but they require much more careful consideration. A telltale sign of a timber frame building is if it's, say, a terrace building or a semi-detached building, look at the party wall. If it's plasterboard, it's likely to be a timber frame building. Also look at the gable end outside wall. If you can see from the inside of the loft vertical timber studs and a boarding on the outside of it, then again that's likely to be timber framed. And when I say timber framed, what it means is in the cavity wall, the inner leaf of the cavity wall is timber stud work, not block work. In older style buildings with cut roofs, they're often more straightforward because you have usually some internal load bearing walls. So the design spans and support is a bit easier. In a modern truss roof with the telltale W braces, which are, as I say, think trusses, these are more difficult. And there are 2 main options. Typically steel or large steel beams spanning from gable to gable with timber joists spanning in between those steels, or the telebeam system, which is a lightweight aluminium telescopic beam system which runs parallel to the trusses, not gable to gable. Design considerations. You need to have a good think about what you're trying to achieve. If you've got a relatively small roof space, you're not going to achieve a master bedroom suite with ensuite bathroom. It just won't work. Also, think about budget. The budget costs varies hugely depending on how you're going to carry out the work, whether you're going to do it as a DIY self-build approach, how complex the conversion is, what it involves, how many bedrooms, whether it involves bathrooms. But typically, as a guide, 25 to 40,000 is a common cost of a loft conversion. The upside is a really good increase in value of the property, probably 18 to 20%, assuming it's a well-designed conversion. We all know the cost of moving is very, very expensive, usually a minimum 10,000 to 20,000, depending on what sort of property you've got, how much stamp duty you're paying, etc. The comparative cost of traditionally extending, like a 2-story extension, is much higher than loft conversion, and often getting planning consent for a 2-story extension can be quite a problem. So if you're looking just for extra bedroom accommodation or an office at home, a loft conversion is by far the best way forward. Loft conversions themselves cost a lot less per square metre compared to traditional extending. Permissions. Two consents to consider as the building regulation approval and planning permission. The building regulations, the main areas that are dealt with, adequacy of structural design, and don't forget the high design loads that we spoke of. The staircase design, which is the single most important factor. We see lots of loft conversions, get sent lots of customers' drawings. The majority of the time, the staircase design we consider is pretty poor and could be improved. Fire precautions and means of escape. Make sure you can comply with the means of escape and provide that safe passage of exit. Thermal insulation, that's quite high now. The requirements are quite stringent, so you usually need at least 150 millimeters or 6 inches of rafter zone. So bear in mind that when you consider how much space you're going to lose. The sound insulation, if you've got party walls, they require insulating. The floor above the bedrooms below, that requires sound insulation. If you've got tanks in the roof space, you want to get rid of those. They can either be relocated, or often the best way is putting in a vented hot water cylinder or a combi boiler. And electrics and drainage. If you're putting a bathroom, how do you get the drainage from the bathroom to your existing system? And the electrics have to be carried out or certified by an approved Part P person. Also, bear in mind, with building regulations, you can use either your local council or a private, what's called approved inspector. There are those options now. Planning permission. Generally, you will probably not require planning permission for a loft conversion unless you're incorporating dormer windows on the front elevation, which faces the road. Your permitted development rights may have been removed, or there are specific planning conditions on the original consent when your house was granted planning consent. Generally, if that's the case and you've bought the property quite recently, your solicitor should make you aware of that, but that needs checking. If you're in a conservation area or AONB, which is an area of outstanding natural beauty, roof extensions are not permitted. They need planning consent. So even dormers on the rear will require planning consent. It's always best to check with your council, or better still, apply for what's called a CLD, which is a certificate of lawful development. And then you'll get a written confirmation that the work you intended doing does not require consent. But there is a huge amount of work you can do without planning consent for dormers. You can add 40 cubic meters of volume to the roof if you're a terrace property, or 50 cubic meters if it's a semi-detached property or detached property. That includes the volume of any dormers, or if you're doing a hip roof to gable conversion, all of that volume comes within that. But just bear in mind, if you've had extensions, the roof volumes of those will go against those allowances. There's a very, very good website on the Planning Portal Interactive House, which shows all the things you can do without planning consent. So if you just Google or on your search engine, Planning Portal Interactive House loft conversions, that should come up, and it's a really good source of information. So the design considerations is try to look at the property as a whole to improve the feel at all levels, not just what can you get out of the roof space. make the staircase look in keeping with the rest of the property. If you can stack a new staircase to the loft straight on top of the existing staircase, that always feels the most natural because your circulation routes follow through the building as you climb up. Also, if the stairs start against an outside wall and rise up, they'll be running parallel with the slope of the roof. So as you walk up the staircase, the roof pitch naturally creates headroom. Staircases which run parallel to the ridge line or at right angles to the roof trusses often work well at first floor level for the layout of the rooms, but they sterilize lots of space in the roof. Also, if you're looking to create more than one room in the loft, the stairs need to be central so you can rise up and split either way into the two spaces. The staircase, I say, is incredibly important and often done very badly. Make the conversion feel light and airy. Often, say in many modern houses, the fourth bedroom is a really, really tiny little box room. And that often could be a good location for the staircase. And the window to that bedroom will then give light to the landing, whereas most houses, modern houses, have no natural light whatsoever to the landing. So that would open up the feeling of space on the landing and give some natural light and be a good location for the staircase. Think about the quality of space. It's not how many bedrooms you have, because the gain in space in the loft is going to be potentially huge. Most people want to cram a staircase into a little area in a cupboard or whatever. That always looks like a loft conversion staircase. If you can give enough space for the stairs, it's much more successful because you'll end up with around 60% of the first floor footprint as accommodation in the loft. So you're adding a huge amount of space. And if you have a large dormer in that conversion, you'll end up with more than 60%. So give the staircase enough space and make it add something to the conversion. Don't just squeeze it in somewhere. Another consideration for the stairs is if your roof space isn't that large and you have a small bedroom that you're going to give over for the staircase, your fire break to the conversion can be the bedroom door to that space. That can work quite well as a dressing room. So if you're trying to create a ensuite bedroom in the loft, have your fire break at the old bedroom door location to the conversion and use that little box room area as accommodation that relates to the loft conversion. So put wardrobes, for example, in that space, make it do something, but that allows you to rise up into the roof space as an open plan area. So as you walk up the stairs, you read the whole roof space as the accommodation, not up to a landing with a wall and a door. That can be quite successful. And go for good quality spaces. If you're trying to create more than one room and the stairs isn't the center, you destroy the first space to get to the second space. So think about the quality of the space. And be frank, honest, and realistic about your aspirations. That is so important. So a general summary, as a well-executed loft conversion can be a real asset, adding considerable value, both in monetary terms and the quality of living space that you have. A bad loft conversion can reduce the value and desirability of your home. And believe you me, I have seen quite a few examples of this. If you're doing a conversion, make sure you've got all the necessary consents in place. When you come to sell the house, you want to be able to sell that space as proper residential space. The same applies if you buy a property with a loft conversion. Make sure it's got all of the permissions and ideally a completion certificate from building control saying everything complies. I'm going to show you some examples now of loft conversions, hopefully for a bit of inspiration. This property on the left is a typical 1980s terrace property. And the homeowners, in fact, had tried to get planning consent for a 2-storey extension on the left-hand side of the property, and that got refused. So they came to us to see what we could do. And the right-hand photograph is the completed project, which added a really lovely bedroom at loft level. This is again a 1980s truss roof bungalow. And the left-hand photograph shows the starting point. And the homeowners had got several planning consents for the site. They'd actually considered knocking it down and doing a replacement dwelling, but the cost of that was so high compared to the starting value of the site value when you take the bungalow value into account. They decided to do a repitch, so put a slightly steeper roof pitch on the building and convert the whole of the roof for accommodation. And you can see on the right-hand side the end of conversion, and it just looked nothing like the original building. They obviously did lots of work at ground floor level as well as the loft conversion to completely modernize the building, and the painting of the walls disguised all the alterations and things. So it was an absolute transformation. This shows the landing area when you go up at first floor level into the building, and you can see what fantastic countryside views they obtained from the conversion. And from the ground floor, none of the rooms had any views whatsoever. So it's amazing when you go up another story to any loft conversion how your views can improve. This is a very dramatic entrance to the bungalow. In fairness, it was a very large roof space after the conversion, but you come in the front door and you're greeted by this fantastic atrium with a bank of 9 roof lights and a lovely gallery balustrade. A fantastic feeling. Also, roof lights generally, you can create a good effect with roof lights by multiple roof lights joined together. This shows a bank of 4 or a quattro, and that gives you a lovely feature. Also, even a row of 3 roof lights can be very effective. If you look at the gable ends, you can see the stairs rising up, but what you can't see very clearly is a glass balustrade. But this is an example of rising up into an open plan layout where the headroom is not that great, and the fire break was in a small bedroom below, and that's where the stairs were located. This property also had roof lights on the front elevation, again sympathetically done with tile hanging, and tiles used the same to match the original building, but they required planning consent. Likewise, this is an older Victorian farmhouse conversion done with telly beam, and the homeowner had a steel beam conversion, which was really invasive. It involved massive steel beams running end to end, and because it was a cob or chalk construction, the walls won't take any really heavy point loads. There was quite a few vertical posts in the building taken right down to ground floor, destroying a lovely stone flag floor. And the homeowner said, if I've got to do this, I'm not going to do the conversion. But we did it with telly beam with no impact whatsoever on the rooms below. Dormers, they add very valuable floor area with headroom. So if you've got a bathroom and you're struggling to get standing space for showers and things, a dormer could often help greatly. This also shows the bathroom doesn't have to be a nasty little box. This bathroom, in fact, was the bathroom area to the one that had the 3 roof lights and open plan space. So the whole of the loft was a master suite with no door between the bathroom area and the bedroom. We do loads of garages. They make fantastic home offices. And if you've got a typical modern truss roof with no ceiling, the telly beams could be installed completely from inside with no tiles removed or anything, very quick and easy. So the left-hand photograph shows the starting point of the garage, and the right-hand photograph is the completed conversion. Nice glazed gable again, a nice feature. A staircase was via an outside door, partitioned off for means of escape and also fire separation from the garage area, with a roof light over the stairs, again to give a nice feeling of light and airiness to the conversion. And that's the room inside, a fantastic space. The homeowner had a bedroom taken as an office, so that unlocked the space for family. It also kept his work separate from the rest of the house. This is an older style bungalow, not a very big roof space, but you can see there's a little gable at the front with tar hanging just at the top of the hip, but only a small span, about 6 meters wall to wall, a 40-degree pitch, so not a massive roof space. And the rear elevation was a typical, an L-shaped building, so the roof turned through 90 degrees. This shows the telly beams in place with the vertical walls, new support stud walls in place, all ready to take the floor. And that's the completed conversion. The gables were turned into, the tar hang was taken away, and the glazed gables created again because there was limited space. You can see a dormer on the side, and that's the only way that they could get headroom to make a bathroom work. But the conversion actually created 3 rooms and a bathroom. On the rear elevation, there was a small extension as well, and the roof was designed to replicate the front gable detail. But that was a really successful conversion. And that shows you the view inside. It doesn't have to be boring. A bit of thought, a bit of care, you can make a really good conversion. And the ensuite space shows there, that's what was inside the dormer. Fantastic resources out there. There's a very good book by Inrock, published by Haynes, on loft conversions. The Complete Loft Conversion book by Julian Owen. Most councils provide publications as well and guidance, so just check with those. They might have some good documentation. And as I say, the Planning Interactive site is really good for what you can do with planning consent. Well, I hope that's been of help to you. There's not much time left for questions, so I'll leave it either to ask a few now, or I'll be around later at 4:30 for the question and answer session. So thank you for listening, and hope that's been of some help and inspiration, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Digby. I think in the interest of time then, what we'll do is we will just continue on to the next presenter. We have had some questions come through for you, but I think it would be great to revisit those at 4:30 along with our other panelists. So if I could just ask you to stop sharing your screen, and then if I could also ask Kate to turn her camera on. So now we've got Kate, who's an architect from MJH Architects, with her talk, Designing Your Home Improvement Projects. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you, yes.
Good, I'm just bringing up now our presentation.
Brilliant, thank you. Wonderful.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thank you Harvey and Katie for inviting us to speak today at this online event. It's great to be here. My name is Kate, and I'm here with Mark Harris of MJH Architects Limited. We are a REBA chartered practice based in Alton on the Hampshire-Surrey border, and we work with clients across the south coast, as far west as Swindon and as far east as London, going as far north as Oxfordshire. We have clients in Swindon, London and Oxfordshire. We're a practice of 4. There's Mark and I. Mark's a fully qualified architect And we also have in our team 2 architectural consultants. Our presentation today is titled Designing Your Home Improvement Scheme. And we wanted to give you some top tips on designing your project and breaking it into manageable steps, which is something we do at MJH Architects. We operate a stage-by-stage approach based on the REBA work stages, which we're going to talk a bit about later. So without further ado, as a practice, we always start with the brief. The brief is our scope of works and is based on what you want to achieve with your project. Most of the clients we work with have an idea about what they want to achieve, but want to work with an architect to come up with a detailed brief. At MJH Architects, we can offer a free initial site visit, and during that visit, we talk to you about your wish list, which is a list you put together of what your priorities are with your project and what you want to achieve. We also discuss your budget with you at this stage. I should say here that some architects charge a percentage of the build costs. We don't do this. We base our fee proposal on the number of hours we think we will be spending on the project. So the build costs don't really affect our work, but we can advise on how much we think builders will quote, and we can give you a ballpark figure of what your project might cost, depending on the scope and the finish you are looking to achieve. At the site visit, we can discuss with you whether your project would fall within permitted development or PD guidelines, or whether a full planning application would be required. We have a video actually on our website about this if you want to find out more. If you go to mjh-architects.co.uk/UK-permitted-development-rules, you can watch a detailed video of us explaining what falls under permitted development guidelines. As a rule, the same number of drawings are required for a permitted development PD application as you would need for a floor planning application, but PD applications are more likely to be approved, and there is usually more risk with a planning application. But very often a full planning application is required to help you get your dream scheme, which we are always working to help you achieve. The other objectives of the site visit are to get a good look at the project and look at ways we can help you maximise your space, improve your experience living at the property, and also, of course, how you can add value to your property. We find that our clients really benefit from that initial visit to help them understand the stages of the project and to get the ball rolling. So after the initial site visit, we go away and prepare a fee proposal for the first stage of work, which is the concept design stage and the planning drawing stage. At MJH Architects, we find that our clients like to work on a stage-by-stage basis, as it helps them to budget for the entire project, which could be unmanageable to pay for in one go. So the concept design stage. Once the fee proposal for this stage has been agreed, we will come out and carry out a measured survey of the project and draw up the project in CAD. We will then combine your wish list, your design ideas, our design ideas, and our knowledge of planning to produce 3 or 4 designed concepts to show you how your project might look when it is finished. We find that our clients really enjoy seeing how their finished project might look in 2D and 3D images. Mark is now going to talk you through some concept design images for projects we've worked on. Mark, over to you. It's actually one project we worked on.
Right, good afternoon. This is a project we worked on in London. This was for a townhouse. As you can see, it was pretty kind of nondescript really, and the new owner had bought the house, and it was and they were looking to upgrade the house and improve the layout of the house and the external appearance. The house was built in the 1960s, and as you can see, it's pretty nondescript. So the brief from the client was to reconfigure the floor layout and also look to improve the relationship with the garden and the house. The townhouse had a garage situated on the ground floor, and then a small kitchen at the back, and then a small dining table. So it was quite compartmentalised on the ground floor, and there was little relationship between the ground floor and the garden. Upstairs, there was a living room and a bedroom on the first floor, and on the second floor, there were two other bedrooms. So obviously, it was a bit disjointed in the sense that the living room was up on the first floor and there was no access to the ground floor. So our initial brief was to look at the options available, and the client wanted on their wish list an extra bedroom and to improve the relationship between the outside and inside of the house. So to do that, we looked at some various options, and obviously this option, as with lots of townhouses from that period, had a garage on the ground floor, which unfortunately is obviously now too narrow for modern cars. So I'm not sure if you live in a townhouse, but if you know anybody that does, invariably the garages end up just as an extra storage space. So they don't quite serve their original purpose. So obviously, this project being in London, there was parking in front of the house. So there wasn't really a requirement for a garage per se as use for parking the car, sorry. So part of the brief was to look at how we can improve the existing space of the garage. Obviously, in the current situation, lots of people are now working from home. So our initial thoughts were the garage was ideal possibly for a study, because there's a big opening at the front. So it was just a question of removing the garage door and then bricking up to windowsill height. And then there was a study. Also, the client wanted to have a downstairs loo for visitors, which is very important because obviously with lots of houses, you ideally want to have the downstairs loo off the hallway, because obviously you don't want people coming through the main spaces if you can, or you certainly don't want a downstairs loo opening up into any habitable rooms. So you're generally trying to look for in terms of when you're space planning a house is looking for places where you can put the ancillary accommodation. In this instance, the shower room and storage. And the best place to put that normally is probably in the centre of the house. Ideally, you'd like to put it on an external wall if you can. In this example here, as you can see from the plans, the stairs was on the external wall, so that was not a viable option. So we had to go for an inboard shower stroke WC. Because it was inboard, it didn't require a window, so it felt like the logical choice was to put it in the centre of the floor plan. It also benefits from being quite close to the hallway, so it's easily accessible for all visitors and all people living in the house. Key things with internal bathrooms, ideally most people do like windows because it's nice to have it purely for the ventilation, but as long as you have a decent extract fan and a means of getting the extract pipe from the house to an external wall or through the roof, it's okay. In this instance here, they wanted to future-proof the house because I'm sure some of you are in a similar situation where you have possibly got elderly relatives, and it's very common now for clients to come to us and say, I'd really like you to come up with a design for my family, but in the future, we're probably going to be having a parent coming to stay with us. So one of the key wishes that crops up on our wish lists and briefs at the moment is the requirement for a downstairs shower room with level access, of course. So walk-in shower. So essentially, a lot of our projects are involved with period houses. So obviously those houses were built in a certain time when certain types of lifestyle applied to those houses. Obviously, we've got a very varied housing stock in this country. And for instance, this example here at Crozier Road, that was a 1960s townhouse. So lifestyles have obviously evolved since then, and houses of that period, the rooms were more kind of compartmentalized. Sorry. So with the new proposal, which you can see to the right here on screen, is a bit of a cliche, but it works, works really well, people find these days. And that's an open plan kitchen, living room and dining room area. Yeah. These spaces work really well when you have a buffer area, such as the study or a bedroom to go to for a breakout space. Obviously, open plan living can become a bit claustrophobic if you don't potentially have the space for an extra lounge. In this instance, the client really wanted to improve the relationship with the back of the house. And as you could, if you can remember the original slide, it had a door and two kind of windows. We completely opened that up with a big set of bifolding doors, with the additional extension at the back, which was 3 meters under permitted development. We also inserted a big roof lantern. The purpose of the roof lantern, obviously, is to get light in to the back of the house. Because obviously with the bifold doors, you've got a good source of light, but invariably with rear extensions, when you are extending out, you need to make sure that you can get light filtering to the back of the house. That was the purpose of the roof lantern. Roof lanterns obviously come in different sizes. You can have flat roof lanterns or pyramid type roof lanterns. It purely depends on personal preference, really. There's no right or wrong answer, really. So this example here had the bifold doors, big opening. In that opening, it doesn't necessarily need to be bifold doors. It could be sliding doors, or it could even be a pivot door. Again, it comes down to personal preference. One thing to bear in mind with sliding doors are that if you have 3 sliders, you'll only ever be able to open 2/3 of the whole, 2/3 of the width of the opening. Obviously with bifolds, you will be able to open up the whole width. And also you could have a traffic door, which is like a conventional door inserted into the bifold doors. So basically in the winter, you could just use that as a traffic door to go in and out of the house quite quickly. The disadvantage of bifold doors are obviously there's more frames, so it can spoil the view. In this instance here, it worked quite well because the garden was relatively shallow. It only went back 8 meters because of its location. But the bifold doors served the purpose of the client's needs, which was basically to open up the back and improve the relationship with the back garden. So essentially what that's done is it's created potentially an extra room for the house in the summer months, because if you're able to open up the bifold doors, you then have the potential of moving the dining table nearer to the garden, or potentially even in the garden, so the house suddenly becomes bigger. Admittedly, we don't have a brilliant climate, but there will be occasions throughout the year or throughout the summer months when you will be able to open up the bifold doors and then literally just have the potential to extend the house. We went with some funky flooring, different floor tiles on this option here, which the client really liked. I appreciate that, that's a taste issue. Obviously, you've got different types of flooring that you can have. We have specified polished concrete on a couple of recent projects. If you're looking for something more conventional, then laminated luxury vinyl tiles are really popular at the moment. A good brand to go for is Carndean. Anyway, so the form of this extension was a 3-meter rear extension, which enabled the client to get the extra space that they were looking for on the ground floor. The 3-meter extension came under permitted development rights. Fortunately, this house was situated just outside of a conservation area, so permitted development rights still apply to the house. One thing to bear in mind with single-storey extensions, and many councils will include it in their design guidance, is the 45-degree rule. This particularly applies to terraced houses, semi-detached houses, and it can even apply to detached houses. So it's a separate issue from permitted development, so you need to be wary of that. So you might have a scheme approved under permitted development, but it might equally so be in breach of what's called the 45-degree rule. So that's something to bear in mind, because the 45-degree rule is a separate issue from planning, and that is a legal issue that is separate from planning. So you need to make sure that you're fully aware of that, and we will be able to advise you on that in more detail. We work with a rights of light consultant, and if there are any potentially contentious schemes, then we will run the design past them to get their feedback.
Great. So that was one of the options for Crozier Road. That was one of the concepts for Crozier Road, which is the one that the client wanted worked up into those images. So that was that project. So just to quickly go back to the conclusion on the concept design stage. At the end of the concept design stage, we hold a concept design review meeting with our client, where the client chooses elements from each of the concepts, so normally 3 or 4 that are worked up. And then the client chooses their preferred scheme, and that is worked into their ultimate favourite scheme, and that goes through to the planning drawing stage, which is really stage 3. Mark's now going to talk through a couple of projects that we've seen through from the beginning, and just explain the different stages that are involved. Just to say as well that we've been running for 3 years now, and we've worked on around 70 projects so far. Many of these have been residential extensions, but we've also designed several one-off houses, which we're going to talk about one of those in a minute, and we've worked on some commercial projects as well. But we're just going to look at a couple of projects now in a bit more detail.
Thank you. This is a project that we just recently got through planning. The client brought quite an old, dilapidated 1950s house, poorly insulated, in pretty poor condition, but it was in a lovely location in Farnham in Surrey. So they knew the area very well, and that's the area that they were really happy living in. So they decided to buy the house, and they instructed us, and the brief was quite simple, to basically double the footprint of their house. So this was quite a big project in terms of extensions. We were adding 250 square meters, which is probably one of our biggest extension projects. I mean, a 250 square meter extension is probably in excess of the national space standards for a conventional 4-bedroom house. So that gives you a kind of an idea of the scale of the project. We do work on all sorts of projects, really. We do work on smaller extensions and larger extensions and new builds. But this, as I said, was one of our bigger extension projects. As you can see, it had a lovely garden, but it wasn't an ideal house in terms of its layout for a young family, a family of 5. So it had quite a small living room, very small dining area, and quite small kitchen area. And upstairs it had 4 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. You can't quite see from the rear elevation, but the front elevation had a cat slide roof with 2 dormers at the front. So 2 of the bedrooms had head height issues, basically. So as you can see, next to it is our proposed plan, which we got through planning. Fortunately, with this one, again, it was just outside the conservation area, and we didn't have any tree preservation orders to deal with, which can sometimes limit the scope and size of the development. We work with arboriculturalists, so again, if there are any issues with trees, we would speak to them and get some feedback for them on your behalf. In this case, we were quite lucky that the site was surrounded by trees, and there were a couple of TPOs, but they were outside of the construction zone. So as you can see here, this house was basically adding a completely new wing, and then reconfiguring the internal layout of the existing house. Very popular at the moment, but lots of our clients like to have a double height entrance space, which we have there, which creates a bit of a wow factor. And then you have normally, it's not a standard design by any means, but as I touched on earlier, if you are going for the open plan kitchen, dining room, snug area, it is really important if you can, in terms of your plot, if it works and your budget, obviously, to have a separate living room, because that's really good to have that as a breakout space, so that, you know, if people want to have a bit of quiet time, you know, they can go and chill out in a conventional living room. It's also a bit cozy as well in the winter time. And it also enables one part of the family to be socializing and then other members to be, you know, doing their own thing as such. So this was a big open plan area, probably in excess of 100 square meters. So big kitchen island, big table. Key thing with all projects actually, we should mention, is kitchens. We can help with the initial layout. We've also got specialists that we can refer you to as well, because kitchens are such an important part of the open plan spaces. And you have to bear in mind as well that they are probably the only elements that are fixed, really. So you don't really want to, you know, be changing your kitchen. So when you are designing the big open plan spaces, you need to be quite fixed in terms of where the kitchen's going. And then usually your table, your eating area and your seating area can kind of change around if you want to. Obviously bear in mind your lighting layouts as well. If you go for recessed spotlights, you've got more flexibility with the furniture layout. If you go for pendant lights over the dining table, then the dining table is also more or less going to become a fixed element unless you change your lights. You can't quite see from the pictures, but the client was quite keen on the crystal door system, which is very popular at the moment. Metal doors, which have a bit of an Art Deco design. We do actually know a few suppliers that supply timber frame crystal style windows, so they can be significantly cheaper than the metal ones. As you can see, yeah, the elevation, yeah, sorry, the resolution there is a bit blurred.
Mark, do you want to talk quickly about the other project we were going to talk about, Pinecroft, and then I'll sum up after that?
Yeah, sure, let's talk about that, shall we? Pinecroft, yeah. I mean, as I said, that was quite a big extension project. Also, we do take on new build projects as well. Here's one here just outside Farnham again, on a sloping site, again, a 1950s nondescript bungalow, but in a lovely location. So the client contacted us at the end of last year, and they wanted to build a new house. So basically knock this one down and rebuild a new house. This had a few constraints. This did have tree preservation areas on site, which have limited the orientation of the house. We orientated the house in a slightly different orientation from the original bungalow to maximise the solar path of the sun. Therefore, all rooms will have the sunshine during the later part of the afternoon hours, which was ideal for the clients because that was when they were coming home from work. So it's a rather large site. This one was 350 square meters. They don't always have to be so big, but just to give you an idea in terms of budget, build costs of that are probably going to be in excess of £1 million. So it's a big project.
Okay, so that was a knock of house down and build a new build. Okay. Do you want to briefly mention the work
Yes,
stages?
we briefly mentioned the work stages. We're an RIBA chartered practice. So all of our services are linked to the RIBA plan of work. Some of you might be familiar with that. That's been going now for about over 60 years, I believe. In 2012, it went through a bit of a change, but this is the RIBA plan of work in its present form. As you can see, it breaks down the various stages of the project from initial briefing the concept design, develop design. At the end of develop design, you'll be submitting your application for planning or a certificate of lawfulness. Once that's approved, then you'll be ready to move on to the technical design stage, which is preparing the building regs drawings, which can then also double up for tendering purposes. At the start of stage 5, you'll have appointed your builder and hopefully you'll be on site. We provide a range of services from stage 1 to 5. Stage 2 and stage 3, we usually group those together as the concept design and develop design stage. Stage 4 is the technical design stage. That's where you'll need a structural engineer involved. Again, we work with a handful of structural engineers very closely, so we will be able to recommend structural engineers. And stage 5 is a bit more of an ad hoc service because that involves project management. So it might well be that you feel comfortable undertaking the project management, which will involve dealing with the contractor on a weekly basis to go through the progress that they've made and to sign off their work basically and enable them to be paid. So if you don't feel that you have enough confidence to undertake that role, that's a role that we can also undertake as project manager.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to summarise then what we've said today. We recommend you make a wish list for your project at the start of your project so you are clear on what you're looking to achieve. You can either make this on your own or a good architect can help you with this. Know your budget so you're able to plan and stick within it as much as possible. See what is possible for your project in terms of planning approval in your area and more specifically your road. Again, a good architect will be able to help you with this. We also recommend choosing an architect who can help you manage the whole process from the brief right through to project managing on site. And we can, work with an architect who's happy to recommend good consultants for you, because you're always going to need a structural engineer, and you might need a surveyor, and you might need an arboriculturalist. And also a good architect can assist with things like drainage issues for an extension, or sometimes you need to move a sewer or something, or draw up a party structure notice if you're building on a shared wall with a neighbour. So choose an architect who can help with all of those things. If you'd like to find out more about us, you can go to mjharchitects.co.uk and find our contact details. I'm always very happy to discuss your project and give you any advice if you need any. So do get in touch. And if you have any questions, if there's time to answer any questions, please ask away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. So we've got a few minutes left until our next talk, so I'll just put forward this quick question for you. So Nick's asked, what information is best to tell an architect in the initial contact when asking an architect to take on your project?
Well, we will do a desktop search on the property, so we'll have a look at the planning constraints. We go onto the local authority website because that might be an issue. We'd like to ascertain whether you've got any TPOs if you're in a conservation area, because those might impact on the design. That's information that we would then feed back to you. I don't know if you remember the RIBA plan of work, but stage 1 was initial brief. So you're probably already well underway with that if you're thinking of a project. So if you have a brief, it could be a wish list, it could be bullet points, it could be quite brief. If you are struggling for that, we can send you some examples. At the early stages, it's as best to have as many ideas as possible, really, and then we can, work from there.
That's great. Thank you very much, both. So with our next talk, I think because we've only got a couple of minutes, if I could just ask you to stop sharing your screen and we can get Matt's presentation loaded up next.
Thank you.
So next up, we've got Matthew from Eden Spaces, and he's going to be doing a talk on garden rooms and garden offices. So Matt, if I could just ask you to come on. There we go. And if you could just share your screen for us as well, please.
You see that okay, Katie?
Yeah, I can see that fine, and I can hear you okay as well, which is great. So over to you guys. Thank you very much.
Great. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt, and this is Kelsey.
Hi.
We're the directors of Eden Spaces. We challenged ourselves today to get in front of the camera, so please excuse
Apologies.
my lockdown haircut and our few errors in the filming, but welcome to Eden Spaces.
Hello everyone, my name is Matt and I'm the Managing Director of Eden Spaces, and this is Kelsey, our Sales Director.
Hi everyone. Firstly, thank you to Harvey at the NSBRC for asking us to speak to you today, and for you all giving up a slice of your weekend to chat to us about garden rooms. We thought it best to use our time with you to give you a complete overview of the garden room industry. Think of it as your Garden Room 101. This is a combination of the most frequently asked questions we receive, plus information we think you would find useful for any upcoming projects. Obviously, we won't be able to cover everything in complete detail today, so that if there are any questions or if you want more information, please don't hesitate to contact us directly.
First, we're going to tell you a little bit about us and why we've been asked to speak to you today, but also why, when the centre opens again, you'll be able to see our stand on display, as well as one of our garden rooms in the outdoor area. With all the changes that the pandemic brought to normal life starting in March last year, it encouraged me to look into what options were available in the garden room market now that people were due to be spending a lot more time at home and might be finding they needed some extra space.
Through extensive market research, including visiting numerous showrooms of other providers, it was clear that there was a gap in the market for a new company with the ability to integrate the latest building technologies, improving massively on the old practices that are still being implemented by some today.
Over nearly the last 12 months now, we've been working away behind the scenes in order to create the products which we will be giving you an exclusive look at later on. On screen are a few of the many steps we had to take in order to get to this point.
This began with a vast amount of material profiling, selecting the very best materials with the best energy properties and the lowest carbon footprint. Some of the items are bespoke to us, including a high quality interior finish using a Unilim click wall panel and a highly efficient recycled insulation and airtight membrane called Superfoil.
Now, having interviewed several architecture practices, we made the decision to establish a partnership with Boone Brown, who are our award-winning design practice and in effect now our in-house planning department, known locally throughout the Southwest and the Southeast for their extremely high success rate in their applications. This meant the fun could really start to begin. As we started our concept designs, we also established a very exciting partnership with Foresight Sports, who are the industry leaders in golf simulator and launch monitor technology, and together we have managed to create a striking garden room design with a curved roof that meets permitted development rights, as well as housing the Foresight technology, all without the need for planning permission, something that all of our designs benefit from.
Eden Spaces was invited onto the Innovate UK and Business West support programme, where we have benefited from expert mentorship in all relevant business categories, from manufacturing, finance and marketing. This continued and valuable support is ongoing.
This support also enabled us to patent the unique golf simulator design. In the most recent months, we have now moved into our large workshop space and have kitted it out and begun creating our display models, one of which will be on display at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre very soon, alongside our stand. The other will be local to our workshop in Exeter at Greendale Farm Shop. We cannot wait for the centre to be able to open to the public again, so that we can begin displaying our products to like-minded individuals who also value the importance of quality and environmental factors. A few words from our partners at Boone Brown. Tim, Abby and Clive, who you can see on the screen, have all been working hard on our designs, as well as working closely with us and some exciting new clients to help meet their individual needs.
As you can see where our stand will be located, and then the arrow pointing to where our garden room will be outside at the centre. We're really excited about our partnership with Boone Brown, who are as we mentioned, an award-winning practice, and as you'll see shortly, have helped us create some really unique designs. One of our key values is off-site construction, which we'll mention a bit about now.
A huge benefit of a garden room over, say, an extension or a loft conversion is our off-site modular construction method. This isn't typical across the market, however. Having seen the images behind us show why we feel so strongly about implementing off-site construction methods. This means that we are able to construct between 80 and 100% of the building in our workshop. A couple of benefits of that are that it is temperature-controlled environment, meaning we aren't battling the elements that are typical across the UK, and that we can store materials without getting them wet. It is much easier to adhere to the correct health and safety standards and create safe systems of work. Also, we have the lean manufacturing benefit of being able to routinely cut the same pieces of wood that are in a specifically designed jig, which reduces the waste of mismeasurement and time in custom measuring on site.
Our stylish designs and versatile uses. In what is now a busy market for garden rooms, it is important that your designs are unique and suit a variety of needs. Our garden rooms are designed to look impactful and make a statement, but with the versatility needed for the end user to use the space to suit a variety of uses. In the last year, more and more of us have found ourselves working from home. Having a separate space for this can have a vast positive impact on the mental health of the user and productivity. I know I have been fed up of working at the dining room table, for example. We also provide an array of fit-out packages for the garden rooms we install, including office package, gym package, a salon package, and a hairdressers and beauty therapist package. Of course, the Foresight Sports Golf Simulator Studio too.
The first is a modern customizable design made with our unique panel system, which makes it easier to customize the location of windows and doors to suit the customer. This also enables many different external cladding options, as well as forward projecting or side projecting canopies.
As you can see from the modular element of this construction, there are many different sizes of panels that we employ so that a bespoke footprint can be tailored to the client's needs. Some of the environmental factors.
This is our modern, as we mentioned, this is our modern modular panel design. This is all the same building type, just shown with different exterior facades, timber cladding, with a front projected canopy as well as a side projected canopy, or without. So the modular element of the panel means that we're able to position windows, for example, into the corners or to a specific location for the door, really giving the customizability to the client. A few inset images of our modular panel where I mentioned we use a nap connector, which is the same type used by Huff House on their modular house panels. This is our small office space-saving solution. It's 2.8 by 2.5 meters wide, and it's designed for up to 2 people to work from home. This office pod we can construct on site in the same modular panel section, but this one is also constructed fully off site and then transported and installed by a crane on site. There's a slightly larger footprint version which is DDA compliant. We can also, as the bottom right image shows there, we can also install a ramped access to it. It's got a slightly larger footprint inside. This is our timber clad and zinc roof barn style design. Again, this is shown as a large office for one of the clients that we have, but is a scalable option. It's constructed using the same modular panel system, so it could be installed on a much reduced size, but also again a larger size than this one. This is our flagship golf simulator studio developed alongside Foresight Sports. This is for a very expanding golf market, as well as a golf club market. We're excited to hopefully soon announce a couple of locations where these will be sited in the southwest. allow a few questions about the relevant topics within garden rooms.
Do I need planning permission for a garden room?
On the whole, no. All of our garden room products are made to adhere to permitted development rights, meaning you wouldn't need to apply for planning permission. Instead, the graphics show you the regulations garden rooms have to adhere to for that to be the case. There are exceptions to this, of course.
Can I have a kitchen and bath?
Sorry, I've cut her off there. As you can see from these graphics, and it's probably mentioned on an earlier course, if you were looking to site a garden room within 2 meters from the boundary, then the maximum permitted height that you can go to is 2.5 meters. If you're siting the garden room more than 2 meters, then for a mono-pitched roof, you can go up to 3 meters, but still only 2.5 meters to the eaves. Or for a dual pitched or an apex roof, you can go up to 4 meters to the apex, but still only 2.5 meters to the eaves. A few of the other considerations are, like we've mentioned, that area of outstanding natural beauty or listed listing buildings where a planning application may still be required. You're also not allowed to site the garden room in front of the forward elevation of the house. And you can't take up more than 50% of the land of the original building. So if it's been extended over time, it would be the original footprint of the house previous to any extensions.
What is the base made of?
There are a variety of different bases available on the market right now. The concrete base has been the most popular choice with other providers. However, the images you saw earlier are one of the main reasons we decided against it. That and the weeks prior it takes to lay a concrete slab, if done correctly, not to mention the environmental impact of concrete. Ground screws is the option we at Eden Spaces have gone for. On the market currently, there are a lot of cheap budget foreign imports being used. However, we have an association with First Base Ground Screws, who are the market leading provider of quality assured screws. One of the next questions we get asked is what is a ground screw and how does it work? So here is a clip provided from our
Here's a clip provided from our friends at First Base Ground Screws. As you can see from the demonstration in the video, there's a specific toolkit required. We've got a heavy impact torque screwdriver. We'd also, prior to driving the screw into the ground, we would conduct a ground survey with a CAT scanner, which checks for surfaces, gas pipes, anything like that. And that could be up to a depth of 4 meters that you can get a calculation for. So after that check, you then use the ground screwdriver to drive the screws into the ground. This is great because it can be done on any type of soil. With a static calculation, as it says there, we do a push-pull test on the screw to ensure that it's been driven far enough into the ground where it will hold and is not going to be compromised by any ground movement. They can all also be installed on an existing hard standing. Say, for instance, you had a paved area where you would want to install a ground screw. All we would need to do is pilot drill a core hole around where the screw was to be sited and remove the bricks in that specific location, and then the screw, the ground screw, could be driven into that slot. They're also removable. They are affixed. They're designed to be fixed and left in situ, but they are removable. So for anyone that would want to dismantle a garden room and take it with them, then you would be able to remove the screws with little to no impact on the environment as well.
What are the walls made of?
We use C24 construction grade treated timber, which is sustainably sourced. We use a blend of mineral wool and superfoil insulation for a standard wall U value of 0.14. We use a NAP modular panel connector, also used by Huff House, and we have an appropriate external membrane in either black or in either black for shadow gap cladding or white for non-visible installations.
As we've mentioned, the modular panel system is designed in a male and female component system so that it slots together seamlessly and airtight. The NAP connector compresses the panels together, and they're wind and load rated up to 14 kilonewtons, so they are well within normal fixing loadings.
What is the roof made of?
A standard garden room, typical of what is available on the market right now, would have a hybrid roof design or a metal insulated panel. The metal insulated panel is not an option that we would recommend, as it is noisy in the British rain, and the hybrid roof design is not something that we would be able to offer guarantees for the length that we usually do. Many garden buildings, when insulated, adopt a hybrid between a warm roof and a cold roof, which is the hybrid roof. The weatherproofing is applied to a deck board, which is in turn fixed to the rafters, most of the time hard up against the underside of the deck, with no method of ventilation. The rafters remain exposed to the cold outside air, creating a thermal bridge to the inside warmer air, therefore creating an opportunity for condensation to form. Made even worse by some installers penetrating the warm side of the building with a flush fitted downlight. Eden spaces ensure that all roofs to our designs are of cold roof design with adequate ventilation for the roof space. This not only ensures the longevity of the structure and finished materials, but also ensures the maximum internal height can be achieved by utilising the space between the rafters for insulation. We understand why so many companies have adopted hybrid roof design because of the planning limitations and ease of install, but this is something we did not want to compromise on when designing our structures, especially given our 10-year guarantees.
As you can see, a bit of an explanation there about the hybrid roof, cross between a warm and a cold roof, something that we feel strongly about and have expertly designed in our garden rooms.
Will our garden room come with a guarantee?
Yes, absolutely. All of our garden rooms come with a 10-year structural and product guarantee. The structural guarantee and certificate for each garden room can be made out to an address or to an individual garden room number, as well as an Eden Spaces policy backed by a 10-year guarantee.
Just an important part to note there, the guarantee can be made out to an address or it could be made out to a specific garden room. If we were to give it an identification number, that was for where we've had clients that have thought they may want to dismantle and take their garden rooms with them. As long as they're moved or re-erected in the same consistent build practices that we use, then the guarantee, the structural guarantee, would still conform. And as you can see from the inset image there, we use Craddy's, Bristol-based company, Bristol and Exeter-based company, for all of our structural calculations and guarantees.
Can I use my garden room year round?
Yes, with our unique passive house design method, our spaces are expertly designed and assessed to provide year-round stable temperature-controlled environments that require little to no heating and have cleaner air. From mini heat recovery and ventilation units we encompass in the design. Obviously, passive house certification and accreditation is dependent on site factors as well as design and construction principles, but we are already ahead in the field with our build methods and our design.
So like I just mentioned, like Kelsey just mentioned, the passive house credentials are obviously unique to a site location. We incorporate passive house design into our structures, so highly efficient structures with airtight membranes and mini heat recovery ventilation units, and then best orientation on site, as well as other site-specific impacts, also then advised to our clients to consider. A few things that we note, and through our extensive market research we started carrying out last March, is that we include everything as standard. If you were looking at some other garden room manufacturers, what often happen is they've taken everything out that you would want installed as standard to create a low headline cost. And by the time you've configured your space to include all the necessary bits that you would usually want to include, like flush wall panels, acoustic fitting to a metal clad roof, the general amount of sockets and electrical pack that you would want to, in them, it starts to increase the cost a lot. We include everything as standard. Some companies even use bases as an additional extra. VAT is included, as well as installation. There are a couple of methods of installation where we mentioned earlier that 80 to 100% of the garden room build is constructed off-site. For the 100%, that's for a couple of our clients where we build our office pods completely at the workshop, and then they're transported to site on a high ab truck on a back of a flatbed lorry, and then craned using our unique cradle into site locations that can be delivered within 20 meters of the lorry. We're also looking at, for another client, a crane installation on site. So fully constructing a larger scale garden room that's then going to be installed via a crane to a site that's slightly more than 20 meters away from where the lorry will be able to arrive. Bases are installed as well, and as well as a 10-year policy-backed guarantee. The other point to mention on the 80 to 100% constructed offsite, the 80% would be where the modular panels are fully constructed, and that's right down to the detail of where sockets would, where the client would like sockets to be located. These are already preset and in-cut into the relevant panel number. The addition, sighting of windows and everything associated with that can all be taken into account off-site to minimise the impact and the disruption caused on site as well. Thank you very much for putting up with our presentation. We're obviously a little bit rusty from our time like everybody else in lockdown. And we would welcome any other questions, and we'll be part of the panel at the end of this. Our office pods are all priced accordingly, free delivery included within 2 hours of our Exeter workshop. Our other modern panel design, the barn and the golf simulator, are priced on application at the moment, whilst our new website and configurator tool are being developed. So if any of these were of interest, then please do reach out and let us know.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that presentation, Matt and Kelsey. So next part of our online surgery this afternoon is our question time. So if I could just ask you guys to stay on camera for me, please. I would like to invite back on Dave, Tom, Digby and Kate, and then we can get going. So I'm just going to stop your screen there. Thank you. Brilliant. And I will just get Kate back on as well. Kate, can you hear us still? Not too sure. We might just give them a minute. I think hopefully they should clock on that we're doing question time in just a moment. We are slightly early. It's worth pointing out. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to briefly explain how this is going to work. So over the afternoon, we've obviously had lots of questions sent in from you guys listening in at home. So we're inviting our panel of experts back on to just go through these. Now, what I'm going to do to keep it fair really is I'm going to start with so the first topic, so Tom McSherry's funding and finance talk from earlier, and then just go through in the order in which we've had the presentations this afternoon. Then we can cover the range of topics and aim to finish at 5 p.m. today. All right then, so I'm just going to pick out the first question. And Dave's here to facilitate the discussion as well amongst the panelists. Just worth pointing out, some of these questions, there might be a slight overlap. So please do feel free to jump in and answer anything if you do have something that you wish to add. So the first question, I'm going to put this your way, Tom, if that's okay. It's from Alice. She says, funding. Is the process for purchasing and renovating a property for the purposes of letting or resale the same when operating through a limited company as in a private capacity?
Yeah, so it's a really good question actually. The presentation was very much focused around where it was for your primary main residence you were renovating. However, I did touch on non-regulated development funding. Limited companies are often set up by individuals called SPVs, a special property vehicle that allows them to borrow, particularly when you're doing properties to renovate, flip them to sell, or renovate and change them to a buy-to-let. So the structure is the company would borrow, and they are not a regulated process, so they can borrow over a slightly longer period of time, and it tends to be asset-based lending rather than income-based lending. So it's about the project itself, and lenders are particularly keen on this type of funding for someone to have, for example, some form of experience in having delivered projects before, and that might have been personal experience that you're taking into the limited company, or building a good professional team around you that you can provide as part of the CV to the lender. So yeah, borrowing a slightly different channel. It's a non-regulated process, but we have a development team that works specifically dealing with these type of borrowing facilities.
Brilliant, thank you, Tom. So the next question, I'm going to ask Digby, if that's okay. So this one is from Rebecca. She's written in, I have a 1960s timber-framed bungalow. Do I understand correctly that this would be challenging for a loft conversion? Is it worth avoiding completely?
Hi, Rebecca. 1960 sounds quite early as a timber frame, actually one of the first few, but the principles with a timber frame building is that the timber frame will not cope with heavy point loads. The outside brickwork of a timber frame building is purely to keep the weather out. It's not part of the structural element at all. So all of the current loads are being taken by your timber frame, and any new loads will have to be taken by the timber frame. So one of the chief advantages of the telebeam system is that the loads are spread over the whole building. Unlike a steel beam and timber joist conversion, where you've got normally 4 bearing points for the steels, the timber frame will not cope with that. So the telebeams works very well from that point of view because the loads are spread over lots and lots of beams. The load on the end of each telebeam is very, very low. We do loads and loads of timber frame building. So if you have some drawings or want to send us anything, please feel free to email it through to us. We can have a look, but certainly don't be put off. There's, I'm sure, a solution there. One of the critical things is to ascertain what size the timber studs are and also what centers, because that will determine how much load they're able to take. But we would provide all the calculations for that to justify it for building control anyway. So don't be put off. It is possible in principle. Okay, Rebecca, thank you.
Thank you very much, Digby. Now we've got a question for our architects, if that's okay. Apologies, guys, we did start question time a little bit earlier today. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I've just got a question here from one of our attendees today called Ali. Now it's quite a long question, so if you do need me to repeat any of this, just let me know. There's a couple of different parts to it as well. So Ali's asking, what's the normal time from agreeing a design? Should the client expect to receive the building control drawings? What contact from the architects during this time should we expect? I've been waiting 7 months and not had any contact. Having not gone through this process before, it's difficult to know what to expect and whether we should just be patient or expect more from our architect.
Yeah, so to answer your question, expect more from your architects because 7 months is way too long. If you're submitting the plans for building control, you would expect them to get approved after 5 weeks. And what your architect should be doing is they should be chasing that application up with building control. So when you get to week 3 and you haven't heard anything, they need to be on the phone talking to the building control department and finding out what's going on. It might be that possibly building control might have some conditions that they're thinking of applying to the approval notice. So you might be able to deal with those. That might take maybe an extra week or 2, but 7 months sounds like a very long time.
Very long time.
I mean, it should normally take 5 weeks really. So, your architect should be confident that the plans are going to get approved before they submit them. So there shouldn't be too many delays. Admittedly, building control might come back with a couple of questions, but they should be dealt with quite quickly. Does that answer the question?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's all right. So we'll move on now to Matt and Kelsey. Now, again, sorry, it's quite a long question. So if you do need me to repeat it, just shout. So this one has been sent in from Jackie. And she says, hi, I'm already in talks with a firm to build a garden room. It will be set on ground screws, but it's fairly traditional otherwise. What thickness of insulation would you recommend for walls, floor and roof for a room that will have multiple uses, including sleeping for visiting family one day soon? The company does 60mm king span as standard. Should I ask for thicker insulation to keep the room really cozy? And then in brackets, electric oil filled heater.
Yeah, so we, as standard, we install with 100mm of mineral wool as well as Superfoil SF40, which is 65mm thick. So that's a combination of 165. Now we get a U value in the wall of 0.14 with that makeup. And if you're going to be looking at having it as a additional living accommodation, you're going to want to ask them to put more than 70mm of a king span in through there. They may only be doing that because they only have the thickness in the timbers that they're using of 70mm, in which case it might be that they'd need to increase the width of those. But we would recommend asking for certainly more than that.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we've done one question for each of our panelists, so I'm going to take it back to Tom now, if that's okay. Now this was sent in a bit earlier during your talk, Tom, so it's been sent in anonymously, but we've got someone asking how habitable is quote unquote habitable. I've bought recently a relatively unmodernized property, but it does have a kitchen and a bathroom. Would this be mortgageable with most residential mortgage lenders?
It's a really good question, and one that's difficult to answer without seeing the property itself and the condition of it. Until a Chartered Institute valuer visits the property, that's the point at which you would know whether they would deem it mortgageable. There is a perception, as long as it has a functioning kitchen and the heating works, it's got running water, the electrics are functional, but it's far more detailed than that, and it requires the input of a Chartered Institute valuer to provide us with the certainty that the property is mortgageable. Very difficult to answer without seeing it, and you've always got the opportunity to instruct a valuation, which would be done as part of any mortgage process, but also could be done independently to ensure the property is indeed suitable.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, and back on to the topic of loft conversions. So this one has been sent in from Philip, and he's written, are there any headroom limitations for a loft conversion? I have a low pitch roof with no standing headroom, but all the same, it could make a usable space, a playroom, etc.
Philip, essentially under the building regulations, no, there are no height limitations at all. The only height restrictions are above the staircase, which serves that space. I don't know exactly what height you've got, but if you can't stand up in it, then it may be problematic, especially when you take into account you're going to lose further space with the insulation on the slopes and the reinforcement of the floor. Also, you won't be able to sell that space probably as proper residential. So I would, think before you start spending a lot of money, because effectively, whether you've got enough height or not, the cost of the conversion to get residential loading things is going to be the same, irrespective of your headroom. So I don't know whether the property is attached or detached. What we do on quite a lot of projects, if it's detached, is actually put a new roof on at a steeper pitch. That creates the necessary headroom, but it will require planning consent. But I'd say I don't know whether it's attached or detached or property. But personally, I would only use that space for storage. That's all you can really call it, if it's that low. So I hope that's of help anyway. Thanks for that.
Katie, I'd like to add a little one there. We've seen a couple of bungalows, well, properties with low pitch roofs, where the plant room has been put into the loft. There was structurally it took the weight, but the hot water cylinder, the boiler, ventilation, photovoltaic inverters, all of that stuff moved up to maximize the space downstairs. And so long as there's a loft ladder and it's boarded out and it's got lighting, then you can use it as a plant room. Yeah. It's not habitable space, but you can put a lot of stuff in there, not only storage, your Christmas tree and all of those important things, but a plant room can quite realistically be put there.
Okay, thank you very much. So back to Kate and Mark now. So this question has been sent in from Ian, and they've written, I'm looking to appoint an architect to build an extension. Some have already visited and a few more are coming next week. My problem is that so far I have asked for a simple pencil sketch, but I note some reluctance to provide anything before we commit to one architect. Without anything, we don't have a way to see how inspiring each person is. Chicken and egg. Any ideas, please?
Well, I think what we do is we show our previous work when we come for our initial visit. So we show what we're able to do, don't we? And I think that some architects now can't always do the doodling because a lot of the drawings are on CAD now. But obviously we do both.
Yeah, I think the starting point would be for the architects to maybe show you similar type of projects that they've undertaken, and that should give you a good idea of their skill range. It's difficult to expect architects to come up with sketches free of charge, to be honest with you. So, I mean, they might be able to doodle some sketches on a piece of paper whilst they're talking to you, but it'd be very rare to find an architect that would provide any free drawing material as such. They would be able to possibly give you some free time to talk about your project, but yeah, that would be my advice. If in the course of the meetings that you've had with them that they're getting out their sketch pad, then that might be helpful. But yeah, I think my advice would probably be to go on recommendations, or yeah, you know, if they've got projects that you feel are relatable to your project, is always a good starting point.
And if you want to see sketches, then ask to see sketches of previous projects, and I'm sure the architects will be happy to show those.
Lovely, thank you very much. So back to Eden Spaces now. So this one has been sent in from Emma, and she says, great offering. What sort of site access do you need in order to be able to deliver the materials, for example, an articulated lorry?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Emma, if it's a modular panel construction, they're transported to site in a regular long wheelbase panel van. If for a couple of our clients they're transported fully constructed, they do need not an articulated lorry, but it is it's a long flatbed lorry. But if through our modular panel design, which is why we've spent so much time designing the system, they can be transported to site in our long wheelbase panel vans, and then assembled on site on the base. I hope that helps.
Great, thanks guys. So what I'm going to do now is take one of the first questions that we had through this afternoon from a few hours ago. Now, it's not really directed at one person, so I'll put this out to the panel. And Dave, you might want to see if there is someone you think might like to answer this first, but it'd be great if other people could comment on it too. So it's been sent in from Greg, and he's asked, are there websites or apps that can help to visualize the finished product when we're doing renovations, for example, color and design?
I think start with the architects, but I think everybody's going to have an answer for that a bit, except maybe Tom.
I can't really think of any apps myself, to be honest with you. I know that some of our clients have got apps and they've got free CAD software program that's quite limited, but it can, you know, produce basic designs, but they can only take you so far. So at that stage, you're probably, when you reach the stage of producing your plans in these free software packages, you probably need to start discussing with an architect the next stages of the project, because the architect service is obviously not just limited to design, but it's dealing with planners, various consultants such as structural engineers, building control. So yes, it's probably worth having a chat with the architect when you've got your drawings to a certain stage. You
can get kitchen companies to give you images of kitchens and things for free. I think they're still doing for free, aren't they? Bricks and Howdens. If you want to visualise the kitchen, they'll come round and measure up, and you can get a kitchen image done for you for free. But in terms of apps, no, we can't really think of any that will give you a complete image of a house or a room.
No. I've just recently finished, Dave, a bit like yourself, where we changed the back third of the house and opened it up from compartmentalised into an open plan kitchen, living, dining area, put all the glazing in the back. and was struggling to make the decision whether it was the right one or not because I couldn't picture the space. Our architect was absolutely fabulous and created it on the VR goggle system and took us to the architect's office. And we could look from inside the house out into the garden space. We could go out into the garden and look inside and walk about it as an open space, and completely convinced me that it was the right thing to do, and was a major assistance because actually he put the kitchen we had designed into the system as well. So and maybe your architect has that technology to do that, and it was a real eye opener for me.
Yeah, it's amazing what the technology available now.
Yeah, we design a lot of our schemes in 3D, but to be honest with you, that's an extra cost because some of our projects don't require the 3D drawing because they can be quite time consuming, and you might find that the architect will charge extra for that. So it's worth bearing that in mind.
It's quite time consuming making the reading 3D.
Yeah, I mean, a good resource is Pinterest, maybe, if you're struggling to visualize your scheme. So I'm sure you'll probably be able to find schemes that are quite similar and design ideas that you're looking at that could apply to your scheme.
Yeah, we used a few apps for color rendering. Some of the paint companies do apps that you can just photograph. Yeah, and you've got to make sure though that you photograph the room or look at the room in the right light. Otherwise, it just blends the different walls together. But it can help in sort of thinking of feature colors on walls, and those are free apps available from some of the bigger brand paint companies.
Okay then, if no one else has got any other comments on that, we'll move on. So yeah, okay, next question then. So this one I think would probably be best for you, Dave, but let's see, we might be able to open up to everyone else as well. So this one's from Emma, and she's written, we're buying a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, semi-detached house, approximately 100 square meters, that needs completely gutting. How much, in terms of a ballpark figure, would it cost just to install the MVHR air source heat pump and the necessary accompanying air tightness materials, and ignoring any additional insulation?
100 square meters. Having not seen the property, it's very difficult to say, but let's just assume that we can run ducts pretty easily. MVHR in a 100 square meter house, probably somewhere around £3,000 fully installed. The equipment's going to probably cost you 1,200 quid, somewhere around there. Air source heat pump for that size property, probably looking at about £9,000 to £11,000, depending who you ask and what brand you put in. Once again, it's like buying a car. You can buy a Bentley and you can buy something a lot cheaper as well. So those sort of figures. What was the other part of that question? Was air source heat pump and ventilation?
Yeah, MVHR was one of them.
Yeah. What else was on there? I can't remember. Was it underfloor heating or anything?
Wasn't actually. 1 second, Dave. Let me just find that.
Well, if it was underfloor heating, just cost around £40 a square meter of floor area for underfloor heating.
So sorry, yeah, it's MVHR air source heat pump and the necessary accompanying air tightness material.
Air tightness to get into an existing property is probably going to be nearly impossible. So I wouldn't want to hazard a guess. It'll cost you more in labor than materials for that. So we weren't able to get ours airtight, not by a long shot, so we didn't even try. We just took care of the low-hanging fruit and managed the property thereafter. Getting retrofitting air tightness into a property is a difficult task, and I'd also question the efficiency of an air source heat pump in a property that size as well. If you're on gas, a combi boiler is going to be a far better result. Not the popular result, but my opinion anyway.
Brilliant, thank you, Dave. So I'm going to move on to this last question from Uma, and then I've got a couple of questions that I would like to put out to the panelists that I think would be quite helpful for everyone listening in to answer. So this one is from Uma. So she's written in, I'm an architect planning to improve the insulation of my uninsulated but solidly built terrace house in a sustainable, economical way. With a future renovation in mind. Two measures I'm proposing this year are adding insulation to the kitchen floor, which is presently 150 millimetres lower than the main dining room, providing cellulose insulation in the roof space. I have plans to renovate the kitchen and bathroom in the future when I have the funds. Please could you advise? So Dave, Digby, and then Mark and Kate, this question might be suitable for you. So Dave, I'll leave that with you, and then we can open it up to everyone.
Fabric first, I'd be going with. Yes, you've got some space in that floor, get the insulation in, work on air tightness where you can. Fabric first, eliminate the need for the heat before you work out how much heat you need. Personally, just look at those details, but I'll open it up now to possibly the other architects maybe have some experience of the procedures and the steps that they take on that as well.
Is it possible just to hear the question again, please? We talked about insulation in the kitchen floor and providing cellulose. Could you repeat it again, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely fine. I'll read the whole question just so that you're happy. So it's, I'm an architect planning to improve the insulation of my uninsulated but solidly built terrace house in a sustainable, economical way with future renovation in mind. Two measures I'm proposing this year are adding insulation to the kitchen floor, which is presently 150 millimetres lower than the main dining room, and providing cellulose insulation in the roof space. I have plans to renovate the kitchen and bathroom in the future when I have the funds. Please, can you advise?
I think, yeah, it's quite a lot you want to do there, isn't it, really? Yeah, I mean, I suppose you might want to take a piecemeal approach, really, but I suppose you probably want to take an overall view of it, and yeah, you just need to be careful that it's not completely airtight, because then you'll have issues with condensation. So you need to yeah, think carefully about it, and yeah, do lots of research, I'd recommend. Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
And
great, thank you very much, guys. So we've got just under 10 minutes left. So what I'm going to do now is put a question to all of our panelists. I'd like to start with Tom, and then we can go in the order in which they've presented. So the question is, what is something that people commonly overlook when talking or thinking about your product or service?
There's a couple of fundamentals. One is actually when they look towards understanding the requirement for their budget. We often see the client working with an architect and designing a stunning 300 square metre house, to then come and speak to us to discover that they can afford to fund a 200 square metre house, and they're back to the drawing board. I would much prefer if they start with us to work out a very clear budget and cash flow strategy, and then design the house to the budget. Too often it happens the other way about. The other thing, of course, to consider is rightly we're moving to more environmentally responsible design and builds. We're pushing the boundaries in terms of materials that have been used, particularly as external claddings. And the client needs to be conscious of the choice of those and how it impacts on their lending options. But I think primarily I would prefer if most customers, whatever their project would be, is that they focus on their cash flow and they take their advice for funding earlier in the process prior to design. So they understand the impact of that, and they're then actually doing the justice to the architect, and the architect's designing to a calculated budget rather than an assumed one that might be incorrect.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. So I will now ask the same question to Digby. So just to repeat that question for everyone again. So it's, what is something that people commonly overlook when thinking about your product or service? So I'll go to Digby and then Kate and Mark and Matt and Kelsey.
Thanks, Katie. I think the single biggest thing when people consider our product is not taking everything into account. If they compare, for example, the telebeam system to using steel beams, you can buy steel and timber relatively cheaply, but that's where your problems start. Our system is all about ease and speed and labour saving when you start the project on site. My theory is that if every structural engineer was made to install what they design, their approach would be very, very different. You have people trying to get steel beams into lofts that weigh half a ton. Now, I don't know how people get that past health and safety, for example, and make it work, but those are the things that I think people don't consider really when they consider our product to get the actual true cost of everything and how easy and quick to install telebeam is. That's what it's all about.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. On to you, Kate and Mark.
Yeah, I think we would agree with Thomas. The key thing is getting the budget fixed. And I mean, you don't want to pen in clients' ambitions, but equally so they have to be realistic. And the worst thing you would want is to get planning for a scheme that they can't approve. So usually we do like to, we will look at costings from previous projects, and then we will basically tell the clients if we feel that they're being a bit over ambitious. Equally so, with some clients, they might want to apply for planning for a project that they know that they can't quite afford, but if they're working towards saving towards it, they might be able to afford it, maybe, a year or so down the line. Thing to bear in mind there is that planning is only valid for 3 years. So the thing is just to, try and make sure the clients are being realistic, because otherwise they might end up paying their consultants for design changes, which is counterintuitive really, because they're losing money that way as well. So budget is the key really. What do you say? Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, on to you, Matt and Kelsey.
So I think there are a few different things with our product that people don't necessarily take into account when looking at what's on the market at the moment. We found from doing our market research that there are a lot of different offerings now. With everything that's happened in the last year, the market has become more densely populated with people providing garden rooms, but the quality of the materials used really does differ, and that's going to affect the longevity of the structure that you decide to go for. So we have really tried to sort of give you the best quality product to make sure that your structure is going to last the longest. There is also a different amount of disruption depending on what provider you use. We've touched on our base options today. We've seen, and earlier in our presentation, there's some pictures of some pretty chaotic sites for what is just installing a garden room looks like an absolute massacre of their garden. And if we can avoid that, we definitely want to. So it's just really for people to really take into account all the different options. The pricing might seem quite similar, but what you're getting for that price is probably quite different.
Lovely. Thank you. The final question that David and I wanted to put to all of our panelists today, and again, we'll start with Tom. So it's, what would your top tip be for any of our viewers today thinking of embarking on a renovation or home improvement journey? So your top tip, and if you can answer in 30 seconds to a minute.
Excellent. Well, first of all, make sure you're dealing with someone that specialises in the area that you're working with. You can see that some projects are very bespoke, so deal with a specialist is important. Be realistic and ensure that it's budgeted properly. The most important thing is understanding, because I mentioned earlier, every day has the potential to be a pay away day, so you need to know when the funds arrive on site and you need to understand that the funding strategy that's in place meets the demands of your contractual payments. And there's a lot of tradespeople out there who have their hand out waiting to be paid and don't get paid, predominantly because people have got it wrong. Make sure it's not your project. Focus on cash flow.
Great, thanks, Tom. Digby?
My advice, as I touched on in the presentation, is staircase design. That is the single thing which is always done often quite badly. It's the most important design aspect in any conversion, not only for the lofts, but for the benefit of the rest of the property. So spend as much time as you can, get the solution right. It can make such a difference to the success of your conversion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Kate and Mark.
Yeah, we would say the client just to be open and honest with the architect, because if they're prepared to be open with the architects, then there's the potential to work really well together. If they're a bit closed with their ideas, then it's probably not going to lead to a productive relationship. And they also need to be honest and open with the architect if there's any issues in terms of financing as well, because there's no point engaging an architect to design something that they're not able to afford. So it's just being realistic and being open and being prepared to work together with the architect in a productive manner. Thank you.
Thanks. And on to Matt and Kelsey.
So I think probably our top tip is to do your market research before deciding on what sort of garden room provider to use. Look at the usage of what you're going to want to use your garden room for. You know, if it's something that you're only going to use once a month, you might not want to go in as much detail as we do with ours. But if you're going to use it for working from home every day, you want to make sure it is suitable for the usage that you're going to be using it for, and that when it's pouring with rain, which it is here today, you can't hear it constantly on your roof. So I think it's definitely to look into exactly who you're using and that it matches your usage as well.
I think one of the other tips we usually like to say to people as well is try and create a floor print of your area required in your garden. So trace it out, whether it's using some sort of paper or rulers and bits and pieces, having an idea of the space that you have available and what you would like to use is often a good starting point. Then you've got a indication of the size base that you want to go for.
Fantastic. I'd actually like to put you on the spot, Dave, to answer that question as well, if you've just got 30 seconds to do that.
No, that's fine. I think that space one is the most important thing. You've got to work out how much space stuff takes. Not only when you're putting ducting or heating systems into your house, but even if you're thinking about putting in underfloor heating, if you're just going to put it on top of the floor, that's going to throw out the way that your staircase works. So you've really got to think about what you're putting in and how much space it's going to take. Be realistic about the amount of space that things take up, allowing them to have serviceability as well. So space is key. Work out what you want, how much space it takes, and the relationship it has on other items in your property. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. So yes, just a huge thank you to all of our excellent panelists that have joined us today for your presentations, as well as for taking the time to answer everyone's questions this afternoon. A huge thank you as well to everyone who's joined us at home and has been listening in over the last few days. I really hope you found these sessions informative and inspiring. We have run them in lieu of our January show, and we do hope to welcome you all back into the centre soon, but I hope that this has helped you in terms of your research for your home building projects. So just a quick reminder really from us at NSBRC before we all log off today. I just wanted to sort of echo what Harvey was saying if you were on the earlier session. I know that he's already mentioned that we are running a 15% discount across our range of training courses until the end of January. So there is just the rest of today and then tomorrow if you do want to take advantage of this discount. If you found this session in particular helpful, just to let you guys know, we are doing a Heating Your Home course soon with David Hilton. So that's coming up on Friday the 12th of February, and he also does a renovation course as well, which we're hoping to run at the centre later on in April. So if you do want any further information on any of our events, including the courses, do feel free to get in touch. I'd be happy to have a chat with you about that. And if you have enjoyed listening to the rest of our partners' presentations during these online surgeries, I would like to just direct you to our website, where you can find a complete list of all of our exhibiting partners that are with us currently. It's just on www.nsbrc.co.uk. You just need to head on to the exhibitors tab directly from our homepage. We're offering an online lead service if you do want to request any further information from any of our partners. So thank you very much for sticking with us until the end. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. We hope to welcome you back to the centre again very soon. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care now.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.